Yes, I guess.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Political Pigpen, episode 2.5. We were originally going to do this after episode 2, which was our conversation on the meaning of liberalism as an ideology, as a tactic, just historically, because it is kind of a bit of a nebulous term in the greater scheme of things, or ideologically speaking, it can mean many different things. It means many different things to many different people. But so we figured that we were just going to end up continuing it because it went long and we went pretty late into the night. But so yeah, we are going to continue from where we left off last time, which was, I forget exactly where it was, but I guess we'll start by rehashing. Each of you will give your own individual takes on what exactly liberalism is, historically speaking, in terms of modern day. Like, what do you think it is, definitively speaking? And we will start with Amir.
Liberalism, in the modern context, in the modern 21st century context, right?
Just in general, yeah.
Okay. Liberalism is more or less at its core an economic and political philosophy with prescription for governments and policy, all aiming towards the maximum freedom of choice and autonomy for the individual. We design it in its purpose, and governments, all institutions bear in mind basically maximizing people liberty and decision to choose the path and course in their own lives. That's how I see liberalism.
Fair enough. All right. And what about you, Chicago? How would you go about defining it in your own terms? You can put any sort of spin on it, whether you have a positive or a negative opinion on it. I really don't care.
All right. Well, unlike some of my compatriots on Twitter, I still have a generally positive view on liberalism because I define liberalism as the defining and protecting of the three natural rights, which are life, liberty, and property, and the allowing for the maximum amount of freedom for economic gain.
Okay. And Alkazai, my friend, what about you as the as our resident shit lib?
Sorry, I swallowed my spit.
That's the worst kind of cough.
I know.
It's like worse than a weed cough.
Oh God, I don't cough when I smoke weed anymore, which is base. Anyways, I generally define liberalism the way Chicago did, the right to life, liberty, and property. But it also goes on to a certain extent, you have a few positive rights. So, education, to a certain extent, healthcare. But no, I'm not in favor of like government healthcare. More like universal private along the Dutch and Swiss lines. And you have the right, and the government has a duty and obligation to protect you from violence if you do not initiate that violence. So stuff along those lines.
All right. So would you say that democracy is a necessary, because like, again, liberalism is not necessarily, I mean, it can mean many things. Like, I mean, I think just at its most fundamental level, the most fundamental definition of it is that it is any ideology that believes in, or that puts at the front and center from an economic perspective, because it is fundamentally an economic ideology. It favors property rights and just anything that has to do with free markets from an economic perspective, which technically makes both in the modern American context, both the Republicans and the Democrats, quote unquote, liberal parties. However, they're very like hacky liberal parties in a sense, but they are vaguely liberal parties. However, you do have elements in both, like for instance, specifically in the Democratic Party, like Bernie Sanders. I mean, I suppose in a sense you could consider him a quote unquote liberal in like the FDR sense, because he's not for like seizing the means of production. I mean, he might be deep down, but at least for the optics' sake, he's some weird variety of liberal. But so in the general sense, like liberalism, I'd say would be any ideology that believes in markets as a driving force from an economic perspective and a social perspective.
Oh, so you'd consider like social democracy liberalism? Because I really wouldn't.
Okay, so it would not be like quote unquote true liberalism, but it would be in the general, like if you're saying liberalism in the broadest of senses. However, again, this is where it's really nebulous. It's definitely not classical liberalism.
Even then, I would not call social democracy or democratic socialism a form of liberalism. I would classify that as
definitely not democratic socialism.
Even social democracy, no, it is not liberalism.
Yeah, because social democracy sprung out of socialist thought, and it originally was intended as a means to an end. It was originally intended as a transition to socialism, but in most Western European countries, it became the end when they realized, oh hey, this isn't a bad ending point, because you still had some markets, economic prosperity, along with like social welfare programs.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you can still have social welfare programs and still, even like classical liberalism, for example, it's a spectrum. You could have like hardcore like Randians and who like do not believe, or like Nozikians who believe in a hardcore like night watchman state. But then you can also have, you can have like classical liberals who believe in like a laissez-faire economy, but then also believe that government services should exist. For instance, there's a reason.
That's neoliberalism, not classical liberalism.
Well, neoliberalism in the old school sense, because remember, neoliberalism used to mean something completely different, like in the Hayekian sense. Like Hayek was a classical liberal, but he was the one who coined the term neoliberalism to begin with, to refer to a sort of resurrected form of classical liberalism, and that's like
not to be confused with the British term for socialism, which is new liberalism.
Yeah, well, quote unquote, a liberalism.
Oh, okay, I see.
Well, yeah. I mean, most of the time when people talk about liberalism, they have no idea what the fuck they're even talking about.
So
Yeah.
wait, do we want to understand why neoliberalism is getting a bad rap from the far left and the far right?
Well, they don't even know.
They don't even know what neoliberalism
not just like from the internet sphere, but like internationally.
So the thing is, the main reason why it has been demonized is mainly because the people demonizing it are anti-globalization, and neoliberalism is a very internationally focused ideology. Like, you don't have to believe in a one world government, but if you believe that like the world economy should be globalized and like have generally a more internationalist than nationalist outlook, you're gonna fucking hate it.
Okay, but what about the?
Wait,
politics, like
Amir.
What?
Amir, first off, I was actually really interested in the original question which Politicrats asked, which is democracy needed for liberalism?
Yeah,
which I don't think it is.
Well, it's like in the practical sense, it isn't, but generally, like what liberalism has become, especially, I think it began kind of with a synthesis, kind of with people like Bentham and Mill, particularly in the British sense. Well, actually, I think it maybe it more or less congealed with the American Revolution, which combined classical notions of democracy as well as British common law with the economic liberalism of Adam Smith. So that synthesis sort of gave liberalism a kind of connotation or meta-narrative of sorts, which fused together democracy, individualism, free-market capitalism, and the vague concept of like quote-unquote social justice. Well, maybe not social justice. I think that's going a little too far.
Social welfare?
Not even that necessarily. Well, in the abstract sense, but not necessarily in the welfare statism sense. Yeah, not necessarily in the. But like maybe just distributive justice might be the better way of putting it, I think.
Yeah.
Well, even then, I would make the distinction between republics and democracies, because the American Revolution was very much a revolution to set up a republic, not a democracy.
Yeah, precise. Well, I mean, okay, when I say democracy here, so I think, again, we can have a completely.
Oh my god, a
different
republic is a
dedicated-
representative democracy. Stop pretending that these two are
Well, no,
inherently
no. Okay, no. Okay, so basically, there's a difference. So democracy, this as a system of government, does not have a monopoly on the term democracy, because democracy, what it can refer to a practice. Because the thing is, we have democracy, but we do not have a democracy. We have a republic that is legitimized by democratic institutions. So you have a democratic process within the context of a republic. Kind of like how, for instance, social democracy would be socialism within the wider context of capitalism, if that makes sense. And again, I say capitalism very loosely here.
I guess, but like people make this distinction between democracy and a republic as if those two aren't basically colloquially the same at this point. And for one, what's wrong with considering a representative or republic where leaders are democratically elected, not some form of democracy? I don't see why those two words are concepts are contradictory.
It is a form of democracy, but only when you have a large amount of the population being able to participate in it, which in early America was not the case.
Well, you still had like, well, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that, because in most of the Northeast, the vast majority of the eligible voters were able to vote, were they not? I mean, voted, did they not?
Yeah, they did. However, only a small amount of the population were eligible voters, because in the beginning, it was only landowners who could vote. Not that far in the beginning, Politicrat.
The beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Yes.
Was that John? Is that the book of John? I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, that's something.
One of the disciples.
Yeah.
And then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
No.
That cringe, but a nice attempt. No, but can we all agree Legend of Korra was boring?
Oh, Legend of Korra is terrible.
I think Legend of Korra had so much potential.
It did, but like the first season was slow and kind of boring. But I mean, I liked it in the sense where it's like, okay, I mean, this could go somewhere, but it's boring as hell. And then it just immediately got shit by season 2, and I stopped watching. I don't even remember half of season 1. I don't even remember most of season 1.
Well, okay, so I'm looking at the timeline for voting rights. It incredibly varied state to state. Because in the 1790s, that's when you started seeing people. I think Kentucky was the first states to get rid of property requirements to vote.
Kentucky, of all states?
Yes.
Interesting.
Kentucky also did not have that many people.
I mean, I guess, but it still doesn't fully.
The Western states were in favor of women's suffrage.
Yeah.
Yes, all of the Western states were also controlled by Republicans.
They were all the main reason they let women vote was to attract more female migrants, because most of the migrants to the Western territories at the time were the vast majority were male. So they mainly did that to attract female migrants to give them political rights. And it didn't really work that well. I don't think so.
Yeah.
You are correct, Death Sooner.
Well, I mean, it worked as in getting more female migrants. They got a little, but it wasn't enough to.
So can we go back to my question I wanted to ask? Why do you think like neoliberalism is so unpopular? Like not from an internet perspective, but like from like an international.
It's personally, I think tied into globalism. That's why.
Personally, I think it's because people half of the reason. Okay, so there are people who legitimately know what it is, and they don't like it because it's LSB. I'll add you in a second. Just let me finish this point. But yeah, so there are people who know what it is, or quote unquote know what it is, and they don't like it because they are anti-capitalists or anti-globalization. And again, that opens a completely different can of worms, because a lot of people conflate globalization and globalism, which are two somewhat related, but non-identical.
It's a square and a rectangle kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly. But then you also have people who think neoliberalism is something that it isn't, and so they don't like it, and they kind of jump on the bandwagon. Like, for instance, you guys know Shoe on Head, right?
Oh God, she's so retarded.
But anyway, so with Shoe on Head,
She's one of the main problems with the state of New York.
Okay, I don't hate her. I think she can be entertaining sometimes.
I think she's funny, but like she's really dumb.
She does not know what politics is. She knows nothing of politics. But I do like her. I think she's the type of person I would be friends with, honestly. But anyway, so and I think this is pretty cringe. So with cringe, I can't pronounce words. But
Base.
but she's like, oh yeah, what we need to do is we need to stop the neocons and the neolibs. It's like, no, you have no idea what you're doing. Like so there are some people like her who think that neoliberalism is neoconservatism, but like the Democrats' version of it, which is not true, because one of them is solely related to foreign policy. The other one
not entirely solely foreign policy, but mostly foreign policy.
Yeah, but then neoliberalism is solely economic. Like you can have people who are Democrats and people who are Republicans who are neoliberal.
I think it's solely economically. There's some foreign policy in because neoliberalism tends to have an internationalist outlook, and I think you can consider that part of foreign policy.
Do you think neoliberalism?
Also, I think part of the opposition is that people misunderstand what free trade is and how it can benefit them.
Yeah, what I hate was when people are like, "Oh, we need to stop all these free trade deals." It's like you have no idea what you're talking about. It's like, yeah,
and even the free trade deals themselves aren't all that free trade like.
Exactly.
There's so many stipulations,
especially from the perspective that we're coming from. Okay, so I am going to add somebody who is left of center here, who does not like neoliberalism, who I guess he would be considered a liberal in the greater scheme of things. But so he's a social democrat, but he has a lot to say on neoliberalism. And Chicago, be nice.
Don't be nice, Chicago.
I have no promises.
I am a liberal socialist, not a social democrat.
Yeah, same here. I'm a virgin that's had sex.
Guys, did you guys know that if you wait till the age of 40 and you're
do you understand that you can have a socialist system without imposing it by force?
Well, that's social democracy.
No, that isn't social democracy, because social democracy is
socialism within the context of within the context of capitalism. So, like,
are you like the market socialist?
Social democracy is capitalism.
No, but I'm saying there are socialist aspects within the wider context of it.
Social democracy doesn't necessarily have anything to say about worker co-ops. I guess most social democrats would probably be in favor of worker co-ops, but
I'm in favor of worker co-ops.
But yeah, great, cool, wonderful. So we're in agreement.
Well, I'm not a social democrat though, because
but social democracy is about redistribution of wealth.
So what if you have somebody? Okay, so here let me so as our resident social democrat, I'm gonna ask you this, and then I think Chicago, you might have something to say about this as well, because this is sort of one of the points that I was trying to get at earlier. But I think I forgot to say it for whatever reason. But
no, I'm a liberal socialist. So
so what about somebody who believes in wealth redistribution, who believes in a welfare state, like a legitimate welfare state in the European sense, but they believe in they believe in laissez-faire capitalism in the sense that they believe in few or no regulations. They believe in free trade. They are basically Ludwig von Mises on everything but like welfare. Would that make them a social democrat, or would that make them a classical liberal?
I think it would make them a right-wing social democrat.
Okay. What would you have to say about that, Chicago? Would you say that's a contradiction?
Yes, because part of Ludwig von Mises, In fact, half of his entire writings is nothing but denouncing welfare. So if someone claims to be a follower of Ludwig von Mises and kept on it talking about how we need welfare, I wouldn't think that they've ever even read Ludwig von Mises.
No, I was saying Ludwig von Mises in terms of
That's all I have
in terms
to
of
say.
like regulation. Okay, in terms of like regulate, like, do you guys understand what I'm saying? Somebody who believes in complete laissez-faire capitalism, in like the libertarian sense, but the
Can
only
you guys
thing
hear me?
they believe in, yeah, I hear you. But I'm just saying the only difference is they believe in a welfare state. But other than that, they have libertarian economic beliefs, with the exception,
Yeah.
like think of somebody like this might not be the best example, but think of somebody like along the lines of F.A. Hayek, whom Ludwig von Mises basically, like, he stormed out of a room once and basically said, "You're a fucking socialist," essentially, because Hayek was actually for like universal healthcare, like the NHS.
Oh, very minimal.
God,
welfare
the
state.
NHS is terrible. That's
What?
A different subject. The NHS is terrible, but that's a different subject.
I'm gonna have
And
to
yeah,
change my
it's
Even
connection.
British
I did not hear a
conservatives
word
are
of you.
libertarians like the NHS.
it's still better in a lot of regards than U.S. healthcare is.
Okay, I'm willing to concede that,
and
but it doesn't make it good.
It's better in a lot of regards than the system that we had in the U.S. before the current system.
Okay, I'm willing to concede that, but that doesn't make it good.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that.
I mean,
Well,
there's
also,
a lot
is-
of
okay.
improvements that could
Isn't-
be made there, I think.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that it is inherently a bad thing. Is
Oh,
my point.
also, is liberal socialism just market socialism? What's the difference between
I
that?
wouldn't say so, but
So market socialism is socialism, right? Market socialism would have the means of production, I believe, seized. As far as I understand, would have the means of production to be seized rather than just having people do things like form co-ops and then compete in the market. Which now I also think that there are a lot of restrictions and a lot of impediments that are unnaturally placed to prevent co-ops from being able to compete with traditional business structures. But I think that were those to be removed, you could see non-traditional business structures popping up, and actually, I believe that co-ops would probably outcompete traditional capitalist business structures since they tend to be more efficient.
okay. I mean, do you have statistics to back that up? I'm not saying that you're not correct.
Yeah, I
like
can't.
empirical data on the political.
I would have to go and look for it and then come back, but I can maybe send that to you after this stream is over, or
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's fine, and then we can maybe put that in the show notes or something.
So,
But yeah.
So the main difference is that liberal socialism, worker-owned co-ops are voluntarily formed, and businesses voluntarily become worker-owned co-ops. Is that what you're saying?
yes, worker co-ops are voluntarily formed. You have like you would socially encourage people to do that, but you don't force that into being, and I don't think that it's necessary for I don't think that it's necessary for those things to be forced. Like, if once the unnatural, like, once the like arbitrary restrictions that are placed by things like the Fed on worker co-ops, once those are removed, then I think that, you know, it's not even necessary for you to seize the means of production, because by being more efficient, worker co-ops would outcompete and then make obsolete traditional business structures. Or at least that's my hope.
Okay, that's fair. But so, yeah, are we all in agreement at least that liberalism, well, in order for an ideology to be of the liberal tradition, it has to be, in terms of like the one defining feature of it, it has to believe in number one, property rights, and number two, markets, as in privately owned markets.
Yes.
Yeah.
At least as a fundamental basis.
I
Because
would-
it's basically
I would also add in the other two natural rights, but yes.
okay.
So,
All right. So we're all in agreement on that.
so do you think
Well,
liberalism?
I don't. What do you mean by natural rights? Do you mean that rights
Life,
are
liberty, and
inherent?
property.
As in
Do
the
you mean
in the John Locke, like deontological.
That rights are natural and they're inherent to people?
Whether
Well-
you're just just purely natural,
don't
whether it's
think
by
that-
God, whatever, just like whatever.
As long as there's a social contract, I don't think that it.
Well, yeah, no, liberalism,
Is-
the social
and-
contract is a firm,
Yeah,
is a fundamental
well-
aspect of liberal. I mean, the first liberal was essentially Thomas Hobbes. So
I don't.
I would
think
actually say that Machiavelli is the first liberal.
he was more of
I
a
don't
proto-liberal.
think
Like
that-
Machiavelli represents the prehistory of liberalism.
So,
Well, then in that case, John Locke would be the first true liberal.
Okay, yeah, I'd say you could argue that Hobbes and Bacon and stuff, they were like proto-liberals as well.
No,
Yeah, Hobbes
Anyways, I
and
don't think that
Machiavelli, as well as Spinoza,
liberalism
were the main
has to
proto-liberals.
necessarily take the position that rights are natural.
I mean, you could also do utilitarianism. Like John Stuart Mill is like he's basically like I was about to say OG liberal. That's not true though, definitely not. But he's he's like the go-to liberal when you think of like liberal philosophy, and he was a utilitarian. However, he definitely incorporated some natural rights aspects into his variant of liberalism. But then you also have people like Jeremy Bentham, who's a hardcore utilitarian who rejected the concept of natural rights altogether. But I mean, I think that there are different traditions. There are different like philosophical arguments upon which you can predicate liberalism.
no,
For instance-
I'm the only true liberal. All the rest of you are liberal haters.
No,
So-
that only works with libertarianism. Stop.
Which is a
No,
variant
you
of
don't
liberal.
understand. I was making fun of Richard Smith.
Who's that?
Richard Smith is dumb and Dutch.
You
Okay,
don't
who-
know who Richard Smith is, Politicrat, but you were a part of Globe Twitter.
I technically still am, but I'm a purist in terms of Globe Twitter. The
I'm not
rest
even
of them
part
lost
of
their
Globe
way.
Twitter. I just don't like Dutch people.
They lost it. Are they? Why? Because they share a border with the French. Oh wait, no, they share a border with the Belgians.
No, they share a border with the French and the island of St. Martin in the Caribbean.
yeah.
No, because they're just
It's
worse
like-
British
it's like-
people who speak weird German.
So,
you
No,
guys-
their
you guys
healthcare
remember
system
that-
is pretty base, though.
Do you guys
So-
remember that scene? I think it was in the third Austin Powers movie where it's like the dad is Michael Caine. He has like this burning hatred of the Dutch for no reason that is ever explained. And then Dr. Evil, it turns out, was raised by by Belgians, and it's like that must be explained. He's like that explains why they're evil or why he's evil. They do share a border with the Dutch.
so do you think liberalism lost legitimacy or intellectual grounds due to 2008 and due to the 2008 housing crisis and recession?
economically speaking, I don't think so, because a lot of it was artificial manipulation of the economy in the first place, and then a lot of it was corporatism in general, which is, especially modern neoliberalism, has essentially just turned into corporatism, which is why there are legitimate grievances against it. And this is what most of Globe Twitter are. They're not traditional neoliberals in the Hayekian, Milton Friedman, even Bill Clinton sense. They are just like corporatists.
So what about
and
you think what about the following policies that many European governments try to follow, such as austerity? Do you think that really
dumb because it's from the continent?
Yeah, no. Okay, but yeah, I mean, so what's interesting is so I'm currently. Oh, who left? Oh, is he getting tired? Oh, did he send me a message? No.
I think it's just because I'm on here.
That's probably. I mean, you haven't said anything mean to him yet.
I did.
Yeah, but I'm also on here.
That's true. Yeah, and you guys have a feud going way back to like what, January? ever since I invited you to that one server. But yeah, anyway, back to
Chicago. You haven't. He's your arch.
Oh no, he's coming back. He's coming back. We thought you banned us for a second.
No.
Okay. But so Chicago. So you are our resident libertarian here. Would you say that so libertarianism is an offshoot and the most radical offshoot of liberalism?
Not the most radical. That would be anarcho-capitalism, but yeah.
Well, isn't anarcho-capitalism that would
no, I would consider it to be a different thing than libertarianism.
I would say that socialism is
cringe,
an offshoot of liberalism.
It's more like a progression of liberalism taken to like even further. Liberalism
comes from John Locke and socialism comes from Jean-Jacques Rousseau. They are two very different.
But I think we can say that they are both ideologies that came out of the wider Enlightenment tradition, but not liberalism. Like,
no,
you could argue that would mean that conservatism is also liberalism.
Well,
so then
American conservatism and socialism are fulfilling the promises of liberalism, basically.
Well, in the broader sense, you can say that like American conservatism is a form of referring to the conservative angle.
Yes, but I'm talking about real conservatism, not Charlie Kirk conservatism.
Are you talking about that is a form of conservatism? Burkean conservatism is still liberal.
Well, yeah, because the thing is,
so conservative.
What a lot of people don't understand about Edmund Burke, especially, is his definition of conservatism really had to do with incrementalism. Specifically, it's not fast change, but gradual change. Not getting rid of the institutions, but reforming the institutions where need be at a very slow, pragmatic pace. It's not about and that's people are wrong to use the words, the labels conservatism and reactionary interchangeably, because they are not the same thing. Conservatism is about preserving the status quo, whereas reactionary means restoring the status quo ante, or that which was before the status quo, which in this case would be pre-Enlightenment ideology. So that would be like the dynastic state.
Which is why all of you look dumb. Which is why all of you look dumb when you say the conservatives aren't. The British Conservative Party isn't conserving anything. That's not what they're supposed to do. It's incremental policy change. For the love of God.
That's also the British Conservative Party is just a party of the establishment.
Well, so is New Labour.
I hate Tories. I hate low Tories.
Which Tories?
Low Tories.
What the fuck is a low Tory again?
Boy.
It's high Tory but dumb.
It's just high. It's just low. It's lower than high Tory.
What do you guys think of One Nation Tories?
Yeah, low Tory is also pretty much One Nation Toryism.
So, I think so. Okay. It's too imperialistic for me.
Can I play a clip from Peter Hitchens real quick?
No.
Send me the clip and I can play it on here.
Okay.
And it's not too long.
Did you just say no?
No, it's basically like a 9-second clip.
Okay, yeah, don't send it to me, and then I can play it on screen.
Okay, it's in private chat.
Are we talking about like Benjamin Disraeli one nation conservatism or modern one nation conservatism?
I mean, I was thinking more of like Boris Johnson, who considers himself a one nation conservative. However, Boris Johnson is more of like a synthesis of basically Thatcherism with one nation conservatism, like fused into one thing. I like Boris. He's like probably the only world leader I like right now.
I really like Boris Johnson. I have to say that's not the most popular opinion on.
Most people in the UK like him or tolerate him.
Like, well, the thing is, also, I really find it funny when people try to compare him to Trump when they're two very different characters.
There is absolutely no comparison between Boris Johnson and Trump, except for the fact that they don't even share a resemblance, but they might like have some similar.
Like, okay, they're both populist, but Boris Johnson's not that much of a populist.
No, he's not, and no, neither is Trump. Really, he's just kind of a fake populist. I mean, wouldn't you say that, LSB? As somebody,
I would 100% agree.
Because you do legit, because you consider yourself a populist, correct?
To a certain degree, yeah. Okay.
LSB, are you from the South?
Well, I don't see why it should matter, but yes.
No, I'm just wondering.
Okay. You got that long Southern drawl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a lot. I get a lot of shit for my Southern heritage. So.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not like Confederate simping, are you?
No.
No. We have no problem.
Yeah. Okay. So I am going to. I'll play that Hitchens video. It's like 6 seconds long. Peter Hitchens on low Tories. Okay.
In my view, they should all be made to pay a special 80 pence in the pound tax. A tax on being insufferably left-wing.
Me.
Yeah, no Jordan Peterson tonight. Yeah, no, that was good. But yeah, so I mean, I am vaguely familiar with British politics. I do follow it. I love watching Parliament from time to time. Most of my knowledge of UK politics comes from Spitting Image. But other than that, what is the difference between high Tories and low Tories? Like, I know high Tories are the more traditionalist type people. Like
low Tories,
high Tories are the aristocrats, and low Tories are the quote low-born unquote.
So would that be like lords versus commons essentially? I mean, probably not.
That's and also high Tories are hardcore monarchists most of the time.
Yeah, like supportive of like the Prince of Wales and all that.
Gay.
Well, more Bonnie Prince Charlie, but yeah.
Prince Charlie, yeah. But yeah, so in the greater scheme of things. Okay, so I'm going to actually change it real quick. So I'm reading a book right now. Well, I'm reading many books right now, but one of them caught my eye and it was interesting. It was called it was by a author from the New Yorker, or a writer for the New Yorker. Hold on, I'll pull up the cover. No, not 1,000 words starring Eddie Murphy. What are you talking about? Stop.
All right then.
That was a weird movie. That was like not there. It's like one of those.
You watching Cuties? Is that what you're looking at?
I'm not watching Cuties. No, it's like I love how. Okay, so before we're gonna stop for a second and talk about Cuties for a second.
We have to talk about this.
What I find hilarious is how the media right now is like covering for it and it's like, oh, it's a right wing attack, when in reality, like nobody likes it. Nobody
likes it.
And it's like they're trying to manufacture consent right now. No pun
intended. Didn't Ben Shapiro say that Cuties was not pedophilic?
No, that was like 2 weeks ago before they actually released it. And people saw, okay, yeah, there is actually more to this. But this is basically probably the best way to show it. Right there. Everybody's getting together and is rallying against cuties. Yet there was this one New York, not the New Yorker. What was the article? Hold on. Cutie. Yeah, it was the New Yorker. Oh, and I like the New Yorker. So this makes me sad. Okay, yeah. Here's the Let's go to share screen. I'll go to the article. Cuties, the extraordinary Netflix debut that became the target of a right-wing campaign. Yeah, no, right-wing campaign. No,
so it's right-wing to hate pedophiles now. I guess
apparently,
I'm a Nazi then.
Yeah, no.
Hey, Kyle, I guess.
Oh, and so you guys know, you guys know Vaush. Vaush, guys. Have you heard of Vaush or Vosh?
He's very unepic.
Okay, so he was defending child porn.
I
remember that.
This is a smear that's not actually true.
Did you see the video? He was defending it based on quote unquote Aristotelian virtue ethic.
It was what it was is a thought experiment, right? He wasn't actually defending child porn. He was performing a thought experiment. So like the idea is if by giving pedophiles CP, it would prevent more children from being harmed.
Oh, that's a lie. That's wrong.
Then, well,
when I was
do you understand what a thought experiment is? Because it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be.
There's a reason why not every single hypothesis
true.
ever has been tested. Since there is ethics to science, and doing this sort of experiment is not ethical.
But that kind of experiment being run in a real world environment would not be ethical. But as a thought experiment, there is nothing unethical about it.
Okay, so
also,
here's
using
something.
Actual
also,
people
he directly
makes it
stated
unethical.
when he was doing a gaming stream that he wouldn't actually be in favor of this. So it's not.
This was more about. It wasn't about child porn in general. It was about purchasing child porn, because the thing is, like, when you have it legal to purchase child porn, and people do, even if they don't watch it, like being open, it just enables the market for it. Because when there's a market for it, it enables people to continue making it, like consuming. So before I really looked into this, like started researching the issue itself. This was back when I was like more of I was never actually an ANCAP, but this is more when I leaned more towards anarcho-capitalism.
For shame, you went away from it.
No, but I was like, oh yeah, no, buying it is a victimless crime. Why should that be prosecuted? But then I realized no, because you're creating a market for it. You're continuing to perpetuate it. And this is like where people need to put their foot down. Like, I mean, this is one of the reasons I think we need at least some form of government, because there are legitimately bad people out there who are going to do bad things like this. And normally I don't think in a black and white manner, but in this case, there is a clear good and there is a clear bad. And child pornography is objectively bad and is terrible for both the mental health of these children, their physical well-being. And I mean, I don't think anything more needs to even be said on the issue.
Well, while I also don't think that child porn should be legal, let me make a statement. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism.
Yes, there is.
Well, no.
Capitalism is the ideology of consent.
So that's not necessarily true.
Jesus Christ.
Oh,
And
God.
second of all,
I'm too drunk for this shit.
I'm not drunk enough.
realize the
You're not even
things that
drunk, Al.
you
I'm not
have
drunk at all.
produced
What I know. But the thing
for
is,
you under capitalism are often produced without consent, also in very immoral fashions, such as like slave labor in third world countries, such as like through the use of conditions which cause people to kill themselves. And you can go down a list of various reasons why things that are produced under capitalism have like associated associative negative attributes to them. I mean, and that's just the way that capitalism functions. That's just the way that it operates.
Sure does sound a hell of a lot better than me toiling out in a mud field for 20 hours.
Because capitalism necessarily necessitates that you find the most efficient, right? The most efficient manner possible to do things in order to maximize profits for your shareholders and for yourself, right? That's what the goal of capitalism is.
Not even close.
No. No.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, yes, actually, yeah.
I hurt.
Actually.
I'm hurting. Please.
I mean,
you know it's
Joe,
bad.
you want to take care of this one? Joe, you want to take care of this one?
So, back to cuties, and has anyone actually watched?
It's
Cuties?
it's actually the law, I believe, that you must maximize shareholder profits.
Well, that's not necessarily capitalism.
What fucking law?
It's not a law.
And the reason
you're thinking of neoliberalism.
The reason that it is the law is because lobbyists have
the law. Then
not the law. It's just a practice. It's the general practice, dude. That's how it works. Like
that's number one when you company.
Okay, well then you should agree with me when I say that is how capitalism works.
I mean, by definition, no. The thing is, capitalism is not immoral. It is amoral. It is amoral. It cares not for any sort of moral acumen. That is the whole.
But the actual impact, the functional behavior of capitalism, while capitalism itself doesn't say anything about morality, it often does due to necessitated functions of it, necessitated behaviors within a capitalist system.
There's no such thing as a perfect.
Do things that most people would consider to be immoral.
But there's no such thing as a perfect ideology. You have to understand that, especially. So again, just like the other night, I might be going a little too Heraclitus on this one, but Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, who's the first of the pre-Socratics. But no, so
I'll pretend to know.
He talked about how life. So he was kind of like an inverse utilitarian, and I was saying this the other night. In that life, the point of life is not about increasing happiness, but about striving to make life the least shitty as possible. And so that's how you have to look at ideologies in capitalism. Capitalism
depends on your.
Capitalism is not necessarily good. It is just the least shitty system that we have. And when I say capitalism, I don't mean. Okay, then what would you say it is?
I would say that the least shitty system that I know of is well, the one that I advocate for, which is liberal socialism.
Well, social democracy is a form of capitalism. I'm talking generally speaking.
Well, I'm not talking about social democracy.
Okay, then
social
what is liberal
democracy
socialism? What is liberal socialism? You have not defined.
Yes, I have defined liberal socialism. That's what I spent the time early on in this stream talking about when I was.
Can you redefine it? Because I'm
first here. I'll redefine. So liberal socialism is socialism. So things like worker co-ops, achieved through liberal means.
What does that mean?
Through.
What do you mean by liberal?
What that means is achieved by liberal means is you don't expropriate the means of production, but rather you would like socially encourage the forming of worker co-ops.
I mean, I'm for that, but I do not consider myself a socialist. Like, I mean, the thing is, I believe that worker co-ops and private corporations should be able to compete with each other in a free market, so long as neither system or neither form of corporate structure is forced by the government. So when you start a company, you should be able to choose like what business model it has.
Well, right now there are unfair impediments, unfair disadvantages placed upon worker co-ops from the government and from agencies such as the Fed towards creating worker co-ops, and I would see those removed because they are unfair advantages for a certain structure type, and one which I don't think is as efficient as worker co-ops are, because of the evidence that the data that I've seen. And if that's the case, then the government is incentivizing business models, business structures that are less efficient. Therefore, they are slowing down the market. Therefore, they are gunking up the market with these inefficient business structures.
Okay, Chicago. What do you have to say about that? Like, what is? Does that make sense to you?
Well, for starters, that ain't how the Fed works. All they do is fucking print money. They don't say who can and who can't found a business, buddy.
No, but they do.
Is there something on the U.S. dollar that says that I can't give it to a worker co-op now?
Well, they, as far as I know, like co-op banks and things such as that aren't allowed to borrow money. And then also, I think that there are laws in place that are preventing worker co-ops from being able to manifest themselves.
All right, so Amir is leaving. You are free to come on another stream in the future. It's sorry to see you go so early, but I understand
I'm not Amir.
Was that Alcazar?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Alcazar.
Okay, you only rarely stop by. Like, you always just pop in for like 30 minutes and then dip out.
It's been an hour.
It's been 54 minutes.
Oh shit.
We're only going 2 hours tonight. So.
Oh, okay. I gotta. I don't know. I have had a busy day today. I'm tired.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you're free to come on again whenever.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. I love
it. All right. I'm about to go too.
Oh crap. Okay.
I'm the one that was texting in the chat, not okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so you have to go too.
Also,
I could.
For the
I
for the
could
laws
say
that
your
say
go,
that you
but
can't have any sort of worker-owned businesses, that is also patently false, since there actually have been worker-owned car companies which were major as well, such as Saturn. They
Have you
just
heard of
failed.
Publix? Anybody heard of Publix
um,
grocery store? It's employee owned
well,
entirely. Everyone who is an employee there gets hired and automatically has a stock in the company.
yes, and
Yeah, that's
I
how quite a few grocery
I
stores
would-
around here work too.
but I'm not saying that worker co-ops are immune from failing, depending on how they're run. But that that doesn't mean that they aren't harder to start. That they aren't made harder to start.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I mean, there definitely is sort of a bias in the economy against them, but the thing is, it almost sounds like you're making a veiled argument as to why the government should favor them over traditional companies. And I don't think the government should take a stance in general, because that would just create another special interest in favor of another type of corporation.
Well,
I'm sure
no,
Chicago would agree with
removing
that.
restrictions is not the same thing as favoring. So removing restrictions on the ability to form a worker co-op is not the government favoring them. It is the opposite. It is removing unfair advantages that have been levied against them. Like it is essentially stopping favoring one business type over another, which is to say it is stopping favoring capitalist business structure types over socialist business structure types.
Well, that I would mainly attribute to just how much it would cost to maintain a bureaucracy with everyone having a say instead of a smaller amount of people. Because the more people who have a say, the more administrative cost there is. As for getting rid of regulations, well, you're telling an anarchist that you don't like regulations. I want all of them gone.
Well, I mean, I don't think that anarcho-capitalism is a functional ideology, and I think that capitalism and anarchism are pretty mutually exclusive, but that's
Quite a few areas
besides the point.
worked with anarcho-capitalism for centuries. One of them even for almost 1,000 years. So I don't follow you on that.
I mean, so what I'm saying is you are essentially replacing one form of hierarchy with another that is more or less just as justified. And that is to say that hierarchy cannot justify itself. And
No, hierarchy can, because there will always be hierarchy no matter what you do.
I mean,
So there's something called human nature.
I've said this many times. Hierarchy is inevitable. You see it in the games of children all the time. Children who have no idea what hierarchy is, just go to the playground. Just go to the playground sometimes and just watch them. There is a clear hierarchy that is naturally implemented as they interact with one another. This is just a
even
fallacious
If
argument.
even the most basic cetacean pod has hierarchy, you're going to see hierarchy in beings.
These are
with
fallacious
sentience.
arguments. First of all, these are appeal to
I never
nature
knew that
arguments.
nature itself was
These are
fallacious.
appeal to nature arguments, yeah. Just because something is natural does not mean that it is good, nor does it mean that it is morally
Yeah, that means
correct.
it exists. So you're going to have to deal with it.
That's all I'm saying, that it exists.
Well,
it is as it is.
If we understand that something is not morally correct, as human beings, we are able to change our behavior and our environment to facilitate our ability not to engage with those types of incorrect moral actions.
What are you talking about? Because I
So
don't understand what you're trying to get out here.
So because hierarchy cannot justify itself, and no hierarchy can justify itself.
Well, it doesn't need to justify. I mean, that doesn't change.
It does.
Yeah,
Because
need
you cannot appeal to nature when nature does not make something morally correct or justifiable. So
we're not trying to justify. We're telling you like it is.
Yeah, I
no,
know.
because as human beings, we are capable of recognizing. We are capable of recognizing that some things are not morally desirable, and we are capable of changing not only our environments but our behaviors to prevent certain actions or to not do certain things. To facilitate our ability not to engage with immoral behaviors. So therefore, to say that this is just the way that it is does not mean is not like a valid argument in favor of something being the way that it is or remaining the way that it is. You need to justify something remaining the way that it is, not just say that this is the way that it is. Because if it is possible, which it is, for us to recognize and then change our behaviors, then it is not a morally justified argument to say that because this is the way that it is, then this is the way that it must be.
We're not saying that this is how it must be. All we're saying is that this is the way it is. You need to understand that. How does equality justify itself?
I don't think he's capable.
And I understand that you're saying this is the way that it is. I am saying that it doesn't have to be that way. And
yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. You're completely correct when you say that, but that's how it is.
Sure. Well, I
mean, if you want to go and try and make
if we agree that it doesn't have to be that way, and we agree that hierarchy cannot justify itself, then we should surely agree that replacing one form of hierarchy with another form of hierarchy that is equally as justified is immoral and it is irresponsible.
All right, Fogg has joined the chat. Hello, Fogg. Welcome to the Political Pigpen. How are you doing this fine evening?
Hey, I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, man.
I'll have to get going in a few minutes, by the way, since it's almost 11 for me.
Oh, it is? You have to get going? Okay. Well, yeah, we'll just have to keep coming in. It seems like we're doing a rotation tonight. So, but yeah, try to stay at least another 20 minutes or so.
I'll have to leave in around 10, but I mean, this is pretty fun.
Yeah. So Fogg, how would you define liberalism? I know you're gonna have an interesting take that's probably unlike anyone else who's been on here yet.
I'd say it's the tradition coming out of the English Enlightenment, a lot of Locke, that privileges the individual above, I guess, other aspects of the state. That's a pretty basic bitch definition, but just off that's what I would give you.
What's your opinion on it? Do you think it was a positive? Do you think it was a positive development, or do you think it was generally negative?
Yeah, I think it was generally negative.
How so?
I mean, well, I guess I think it came out of a compromise of the wars of religion, right?
Yeah.
So you know, um, for the purposes of ending the wars of the period, it's good in that sense, but I think that the establishment of liberalism as the norm in the Anglo world largely made it impossible to sort of have a state function for the general good of the populace.
Okay.
And it continually heads towards dissolution or revolution or what have you. There's no way to build lasting structures once liberalisms become normative.
Have you ever read
society.
James Burnham before?
No, I haven't done anything with Burnham.
Okay, yeah, he was a Catholic conservative back around the 60s. Well, in the 60s, he wrote a book called The Suicide of the West, where he actually argues that liberalism is the ideology of cultural suicide, where he says that the more and more that well, he was referring not to classical liberalism, but to the FDR style, about how liberalism always seeks to reform. Like, its only goal is to reform for the sake of reforming in order to create the perfect society. And he says that, but that is turned into, as a process, it is turned into the, Alkazai's back. Hey, Alkazai, welcome back.
I can't sleep.
Okay, well, we're glad to have you back.
Thank you.
But yeah, no, so anyway, Burnham was saying that but what it will ultimately do is it will turn itself on its head, and liberalism will ultimately seek to normalize like negative behaviors that are detrimental to civilization as a whole, and ultimately it will end up exhausting us, if that makes any sense. But it will normalize. He didn't use the word degeneracy, but he argued that it would normalize degeneracy. And he said this as somebody who would be a quote unquote classical liberal. But he was like one of the original National Review guys, but not in the sense as he was not necessarily aligned with Buckley. So Chicago would be a fan of him. Hello, Grayson. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, possibly.
Yeah, so related to that, I think that once you enfranchise the whole population, what you're going to get is inevitably a Leninist type coalition forming, right? Yep. Where you where the lower half of the hierarchy is going to form a coalition against the other half of it, right? And you end up with sort of continual strife and attempts to sort of invert that hierarchy. And so, yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah. So there's no way to create stability in that liberal democratic framework. It's just continual sort of downward trend from lower half coalition forming. So.
Yeah, and we discussed on the stream the other night. I don't know if you were listening in, Fogg, but that's when we had Outringer on here, and he was talking about. We had the conversation in general about how democracy will ultimately continue expanding and expanding and expanding until it ultimately ends up legitimizing a form of authoritarianism, where the authoritarianism is not necessarily justified on the divine right of kings, but on the will of the voter. But yeah, and on that note, we've had two more people on the stream who just came in. We have Grayson and Damnation. How are you two doing this evening?
What's up, man? Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
No problem. How about you, Grayson? How are you doing?
And with that, I will actually have to get going. So.
All right, Chicago. It was nice having you on the stream.
I unfortunately will have to get going. Yeah.
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 All right.
And also feel free to join us talk with me, Mr. Altazak, with sometime getting on our stream again sometime.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. All right. See you,
All
Chicago.
right, man. Have a good night.
I go.
So, just to fill the two newcomers in, we are discussing liberalism, the meaning of liberalism, what it is ideologically speaking, what it is, what it was, what its roots are. Just trying to get to the bottom of it because it is a rather nebulous term in the long run. Not as nebulous,
for sure.
not as nebulous as conservatism necessarily.
Mhm.
But yeah. So we'll start with Grayson because you came in just a few seconds before Damnation. How would you define liberalism, and in terms of its effects on society, what would you say they are, both positive and negative, or either or?
Is they my name?
Yeah, Grayson.
Oh. Well, I think liberalism has seen some fairly positive and negative aspects of the years, obviously. I mean, within 200 years, we went from mostly monarchs in Europe to mostly republics in Europe, so we can definitely say that that has been a fairly good success. And I think that the issue with liberalism going forward is that there have been still problems that haven't been solved by it, and so that's where people go into the moderate ideas like social democracy, Christian democracy, and other ideologies, and then more extreme ideologies like fascism and communism.
Mhm.
But I think as a whole, liberalism does work fairly well.
All right. Oh, we have another person who joined. Hello. How are you doing tonight, Lapis?
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Oh,
So, where are we?
we're discussing liberalism again. We are.
Yeah, that all happened.
We're going to move on to Damnation next.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. How would you define it?
So when we're talking about the terms of liberalism, right, we have to look at what the core idea is, right? Which is the idea that people can operate pretty much as what they want within reason, right? And what I mean by reason is the idea of Aristotelian virtue ethics. So the idea that what would a virtuous person do in any given situation, right? And when you combine the two ideas of absolute freedom with that, you end up in a society that tends to function very well because you have people that are trying to create the best outcomes. I don't believe in utilitarian ethics, but that's what tends to happen through Aristotelian virtue ethics. And people are then allowed to make their own decisions and self-actualize their own beliefs into the world to create their own ideas and live their lives the way they see fit, right? Without too much overbearing authoritarianism built into the government, right? So liberalism is basically just people doing what they want within reason and being able to live their lives as they see fit and not really fuck with other people based primarily just like the non-aggression principle from the libertarian ideas. That's it.
Okay. And would you say it has more of a positive or a negative effect on society?
Oh, it absolutely has a more of a positive effect because when we're talking about the ideas of freedom, it tends to allow people to make more choices and live their lives as they see fit. The more choices you have, the better off you can create your own life to structure it how you see fit without people telling you what you can and cannot do.
Okay, so yeah, you pretty much are taking the complete opposite stance as Fogg here.
Yeah.
Who generally talks about how he sees liberalism as something that has ultimately degenerated society, so to speak. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but he sees it as generally something that's a flipped Western civilization upside down on its head. Sort of what Nietzsche talks about, sort of the transvaluation of all values. I mean, would you say that's pretty accurate, Fogg?
Yeah, I think it's a generally destabilizing force, and a lot of the success in the West has been in spite of liberalism and not because of it.
Lapis, so welcome back. This is your third time on this. Well, technically, this is a continuation of episode 2.
Yeah.
But continue with what you. Why don't you? I know the other night you were discussing about how, because you said you're a leftist yourself. You were talking about how you saw liberalism almost as a sort of jumping off point, so to speak, for socialism. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So I think, first of all, built into that question is inherently, how do I define a liberal? So, to me, a liberal is someone who believes in the idea that we need a freer market, that regulation should exist, but ultimately, a free market is an expression of the freedom before the law and freedom from, say, authoritarian government controls on citizens' behavior. Um, and that in order to have these things, it is necessity to have a free market. Liberalism is basically, I see, as the ideological justification of the free market. And I think of liberalism as an inherently global idea. And I feel like it shares that status with socialism, which is why liberalism is so useful a tool to bring socialism to the world, because the ideologies of the past, the reactionary ideologies, so tied into identities of faith and culture and ethnicity, all of these ideas are not truly global. They only proclaim to represent a certain interest group, a certain segment of the population. Liberalism it's a global ideology because in order for a free market to work, it needs to be extended everywhere. Now, I think this is why, you can't have a free market without trade and exchange between multiple different countries. It can't just exist in stasis in one singular country preserved in amber. And this is why liberalism is to me such a useful idea, because I see socialism as fundamentally the perfect global ideology, one that can truly realize a unified world.
Okay. Damnation, it seems like you generally agreed with what she had to say.
Minus the whole idea that it tends to be a socialism, like a lead up to socialism, right? When we're dealing with the ideas of socialism, we tend to get to a very authoritarian process because the socialism tends to be the transitional point between the capitalist society and the pure ideology of communism, which is classless, moneyless, stateless society, right?
Yes.
The thing is that you're talking about increasing governmental power to control the means of production, right? And expecting the state to then cede that power back to the population after the fact, which when we look at the transitional... Hold on a second, Celestial. I'm not done. Okay. So when we're dealing with the idea of that transitional period, what it never has happened since to where that power goes away and goes back to the population.
Right, I agree with you. I think that's an effective critique of Marxist-Leninism or state socialism. However, I am not personally in favor of that as a model of transition.
That's fair.
I believe in economic democracy.
Okay, that's fair then.
And then, Damnation, you said, or actually first, before we go into that, LSB/Celestial, you seemed like you had something that you were about to add. Celestial?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that it is not necessary. It is not it's not inherent to all forms of socialism to have that style of top-down governance or that style of authoritarianism that are so problematic and such a problematic element of Marxist-Leninism.
Okay, I get you. And LSB, could you has there ever been a particular style of socialism that you would agree with that doesn't perceive that idea of the top-down?
Well, yeah, like I was saying. Well, yes, like I was saying earlier, I'm a liberal socialist, so I also don't agree with Marxist-Leninism in that idea of using the state to force socialism and then communism into being. That's not, yeah.
I get you. So like when we're talking about like specifics, like the one off the top of my head we can talk about is the idea of socialized healthcare, or like a Medicare for all system, right? You do understand how that actually becomes a situation where the government ends up controlling the means of production in that particular market, right?
Well, I don't think that healthcare insurance is a I don't think that is equivalent to something like a factory, or I mean, that is pretty much non-equivalent to any other means of production, if you were to say, because the thing about that is there is nothing, there's nothing being produced, there's no goods or services being exchanged there to really like justify this thing this way. What is really happening is someone taking your money in your hope to get something out of it, but you might not necessarily even get something out of it. As people with pre-existing conditions have seen before in the past.
Okay.
And so Alcazar. Well, first of all, we actually have we have another person who joined, Neduardo, or Neduardo.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Neduardo.
What's your question, Politicrat?
What were you saying, Alcazar? Sorry.
Oh, you called on me.
Oh yeah, no. Okay, so I was going to say about Alcazar. So you are our resident neoliberal here.
Yep, I'm paid by George Soros in Israel.
Represent.
Yeah. So as somebody who's
how's the Soros money doing?
Oh, it's great. It's paying for my college.
I got my Koch brothers check today.
Nice.
My Soros check should be here tomorrow. So.
Oh my.
Playing both sides, very profitable.
I know.
Like a true capitalist. I love it.
True centrism is getting paid by George Soros and the Koch brothers.
There you go.
Yeah, no, they actually did start a think tank recently. They collaborated because I know they're both like non-interventionists. It was like the Quincy Institute for a reason, or for like a reasonable foreign policy or something. And I don't know, it looks pretty promising, and it just started about I think 9 months ago. And I don't know, it looks like one of those, and they offer some pretty solid looking internships too. Just saying, if anyone's in the DC area.
Well, maybe.
But yeah, so Alcazar, so how would you counter what Damnation and Lapis were talking about in regards to, just generally what they were saying? I mean, I'd like to hear your
can you
take
give me
on
a quick rundown of what you two were saying again?
Yeah.
Sure. I'm saying that liberalism is tied to the idea of the free market, that it's the expression that in order to have proper equality under the law and proper freedom of the individual from state oppression, it is also necessary to have free markets and global exchange. And I'm saying that liberalism is the first truly global ideology.
Yeah, I agree with that. Pretty based.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Not much to say.
Okay. So Ned, what would you have to say about that? You haven't really added anything in. You just joined. First start by introducing yourself.
Well, first off, I mean, I'm not really quite sure what the original train of thought was, but
We're defining
Neduardo.
liberalism. Essentially, we're giving our own definitions of liberalism and what its impact on society has been.
Okay, well, mostly I'm frankly I'm mostly here to observe. I may give a comment over once in a while, but I don't know. Well, I guess my definition of liberalism would be the belief in the. I mean, at least the root definition of liberalism would be the belief that people inherently have rights, and that and that. Okay, I'm tired right now. Wow.
It's okay, man. It's okay.
No, I usually could, but right now.
Don't worry,
Well,
we're long all night.
I also when I'm in Coles, I don't do well. This is why.
Understandable.
This is why I generally I've he's always posting these links to the live chats, and I never join them because I'm not a good speaker. I'm just gonna observe. That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was gonna ask. I don't know if he's coming back, but I kind of wanted to ask Damnation a question, but it seems like he just left. Anyway, Alkazai.
Mhm.
So would you consider yourself a globalist personally?
Oh hell yeah! Not like
Okay.
no, I don't want a one world government, but like in every other sense of the term, yeah.
Okay, so what do you mean by in every other sense of the term?
So I want I want the world to be very economically integrated. I want a more internationalist outlook rather than a nationalist outlook. I do believe in some international governments, such as the United Nations, but not like a one world government in the terms that there are no countries. That's how I view the world.
Okay. So Damnation. I see you're wearing. I see you're wearing a "Make America Great Again."
It's a Keep America Great Again hat.
Keep America. Okay. There we go.
It's the second one.
So, what would you have to say? I don't know. Did you hear what Alkazai had to say about?
Not really. I was, as I said, I had an IRL thing come in. I had someone come into my room, and I had to answer a question. So, if you could summarize it real quick, I'll respond.
Yeah. Can you re-summarize what you're saying? I kind of want to hear what Damnation would have to say in response to that, because again, he's wearing a Kaga hat. So, I think he would definitely have some oppositional beliefs with you in regards to globalism.
Globalism is based. That's my ideology.
Globalism is based, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, globalism, when we look at that, globalism tends to be detrimental to the country that is exporting it, and namely the United States exporting manufacturing jobs that the middle class tends to rely on to allow it to operate and function, right?
No.
Yes.
I know. Ever since, for one, manufacturing jobs in the United States have been declining since the 1970s, and that's before free trade deals like NAFTA were signed. And most of that is due to automation, not free trade. So, no.
Okay. Well, we'll put that aside for a minute. So, the automation thing. We'll actually dive right into the automation thing. So, do you agree that automation should continue?
Yeah, generally. Okay. I don't think it's going to be a huge jobs killer.
So, if you're saying that it's not a huge jobs killer, then why are the manufacturing jobs leaving?
No, because of automation. Like, okay, what I mean by this is, so it's in the same way that like how the invention of cars got rid of all the horse jobs. Like, yeah, people lost their jobs, but those jobs moved throughout the economy.
So then the low labor costs that exist in a country like China are not a factor at all to this at all?
I'm not saying no jobs have ever not moved to China.
That wasn't my implication. I'm just simply asking if that would potentially be a factor.
That could be, but for one, China's trying to create their own state industry, so I don't know how much they're willing to take in.
Well, the original MAGA hat said "Made in China," so I'm assuming that there was a lot of people that bought those, so at least those were manufactured.
Yeah, I guess that too.
Yeah, And also, if you look, there was an episode of Shark Tank that I watched where you had where there was the guy that loves doing like specific the deals where like residuals and licensing and stuff like that is always talking about cutting costs by moving manufacturing to China as well. So in that particular situation, there's a few like and Donald Trump has specifically brought this up as well, that you start running into major Chinese companies when you start talking about like a lot of different things, right? And one of the things that we have to look at is that China's main plan is to become number one in a swath of industries across the entire world, right? And when we start working at a global economy, we have to realize that China is a bad actor on the world stage across the fucking board.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
I'm not against using certain kinds of protectionist policies against China to curb their influence.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think protectionism is inherently good.
Oh, for sure.
That's my decision.
You can make the argument.
It's a neutral thing. It's neither good nor bad. It is a tool to be applied depending on the situation.
Right. Okay. So, Celestial.
So I think, well, I am for globalization. Like, I am for globalism. I'm for that type of thing generally. Ultimately, I think that we should probably start moving away from states altogether, because I think that thinking of Earth in terms of like states is like, it's divisive, and it doesn't really achieve much other than like bringing like divisionary lines between people that are pretty arbitrary. But I understand why that probably isn't going to happen soon. But I think that so one, absolutely, automation is a jobs killer, and we can see that, but this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I don't think that it is inherently a bad thing that people don't work, that people don't have to work. Isn't that kind of like a
people purpose? Like, when people aren't working, it's not a good thing. People need to work.
Not necessarily. I mean, most lower class people.
Have you heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, bro?
You can derive purpose from other means. You can derive purpose through art, through literature, through like self-improvement.
What about people who can't? What about people who aren't talented in those areas?
Well, they could potentially start gardening. Everyone probably has some skill that is not directly correlated to their ability to sell it on the market.
And I ultimately don't think that at the end of the day we're going to get to a point where there are no jobs left. Like, I think we're still going to need.
Have to be at least some jobs in order to maintain the machines that enable a relatively post-war society. So I think we definitely are, though, moving towards a future where trying to achieve complete unemployment and trying to reduce employment as much as possible is probably not going to be a viable economic strategy, and we're better off.
Possible anyway. It's like, I think we're kind of veering dangerously close to the end of history argument right here, because I mean, history doesn't end. That's the thing.
I completely agree. The situation may change, and one day a UBI may no longer be a useful economic tool.
History ends when the sun explodes. That's only when history ends.
Mm-hmm.
Or the heat death of the universe.
Exactly.
I mean, yes, these are 100%. I agree that history doesn't end. And I don't think that, well, I mean, theoretically, I think it could be, but that's way, way, a long ways out. But reducing the amount of work that people have to do, reducing the intensity of the labor that people have to do. These are admirable goals, whether or not we ever get to a 100% post-work society or not.
Yeah, I agree with like a 4-day work week if that's what you're trying to get at. I think the economy can afford a 4-day work week at this point.
Okay, so moving on to so it's interesting now. So now that we're on the topic of economics, let's move on to the topic of unions. Damnation. I understand that you're in a union, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am.
All right. So I mean, unions are a bit controversial.
Yeah.
It have been for a while, especially since the 1980s.
Yeah.
There are valid arguments for them and against them. And
yep.
So you'll have like libertarians and conservatives who will say that they are, for instance, argue that they're socialist, but then you'll have people on the far left who will argue that, who will almost call them, like, frame them as if they were like bootlicking organizations, so because they enable capitalism. Because the whole point of unions are that they are meant to function within the capitalist system.
Right.
Yeah. So I understand, Alcazar, you are ardently opposed to unions in a lot of respects, correct?
Mostly public sector unions. I'm skeptical of private sector unions, but they should be allowed to exist. But I generally agree with right to work laws.
I agree with right to work laws in the idea that people should be able to operate and go to an employer that they see fit without having to join the union. But the thing that we look at with the unionization, right, is the Politicrat brought up a completely valid point, is that unionization is the right of workers to gather and freely assemble as they see fit, right? And as a counterbalance to the rampant greed and inherent abstraction of wealth from the working class, right? And if we're going to advocate for a capitalist society, then we have to and allow people to operate in the way that they see fit to own their business, right? And reduce regulation, then the worker has to be able to make their voice heard and maintain and manage their own working conditions and for their working benefits and their healthcare benefits, right? That has to be a thing that they can do. And workers working together in a collective manner to be able to bargain those when you're dealing with mega corporations on the grand stage that we're working with in globalization and a global economy, unionization is one of the best tools to allow the common working class to be able to make their voice heard, right?
100%.
Would you say you're more in favor?
100%.
Yeah.
Unions are extremely important.
Yeah.
And I think this is a classic example of how sometimes private corporations can be a giant detriment to individual freedom in a way that just as powerful as government can.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we also come to, and this is why I'm not such a fan of anarcho-capitalism, because the thing is, like, you have is everyone familiar with Max Weber? Okay, well, no, he was a sociologist and historian. I think you can compare, he kind of like Herbert Spencer in a lot of ways. I believe they were contemporaries. I could be wrong, but Weber defined the state and government in general in a very interesting fashion. He described it not as necessarily a political body in the same sense that we know of it today and historically we've known it, but he described it as whatever organization in a society holds the monopoly on violence and force. And for instance, and I wish that Chicago were still here so he could argue against this, because he was our anarcho-capitalist, or he is basically the show's resident anarcho-capitalist. But doesn't that mean, so if you get rid of a government, like the kind that we have, like let's say we abolish the U.S. government tomorrow, and let's say you had like the largest corporations came in and filled the void, because they would essentially come in and fill the void. Like I can't think of any other kind of institutional organization that would take their place, because nature abhors a vacuum.
Right, absolutely.
But so then they would come in and they would ultimately end up monopolizing the force and the violence in the society. So like they might start hiring private security. That would effectively become the replacement for the military, and we're back to square one. However, it's less democratic. So you could argue that that can also lead to authoritarian. So this goes back to essentially what Lapis was saying about how it's not necessarily a battle between corporations and like corporations don't equal like liberty. Government doesn't equal authoritarianism. I mean, you could still have authoritarianism that exists.
Absolutely.
But however, they basically in that case be governments disguised as corporations. If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, I as someone who believes in the idea that the most freedom that we could possibly achieve within reason is a net benefit for society. There has to be the critique that there are going to be bad actors in a capitalist society is absolutely a real critique, and it has to be accounted for. And that's where workers working in a collective fashion that tends to enable them to be able to make their voice heard against a major corporation like that is a net benefit for everybody, right? And as long as it's not bound to the idea that they are required and forced to join that union if they want. If they believe that they can stand up to that corporation on their own without the protections of the union, then that's on them, and they shouldn't be forced to join it. Because what will happen is naturally you'll see that those who are part of a union labor force tend to have higher wages, have better benefits, and they will naturally make those decisions to join the union and make sure that they're working in the best interest of themselves. It's literally like this is such whenever I hear someone say that they're against unions, I'm just like, I don't understand where it comes from, unless it's like an idea that they're politicized and specifically corrupt in that.
The criticism of private sector unions is like how politicized they are.
Yeah.
But, like, I do want to outright abolish public sector unions. If we can get into that, if you guys would like.
Okay.
We can get into that.
I don't know if that's a good idea, because if private sector workers have the right to organize against, authoritarian institutions that are private, then public sector workers should also have the right to organize against public sector authorities that are authoritarian as well. It only makes sense. Otherwise, it's kind of a discrimination under the law.
And that's the dilemma we come to, because then we also have seen historically how public sector, with the very existence of public sector unions, almost enables a sort of conflict of interests, because you will then start to see these unions, which, and let's face it, no matter what anybody says, and this goes back, it's basic public choice theory, unions are still public interest groups.
Yes.
I mean, they are 100% public interest groups, no matter how much they will argue against it. For instance, you see teachers' unions nowadays, which I feel like have become really rotten in a lot of regards. I understand that teachers, they need, of course, they need to have a say in this sort of thing, because they're people, they're workers, they should have a say. However, you see them lobbying for policy that will advance their own interests, as all groups do. But then you see them trying to limit, for instance, they're lobbying against charter schools. They're lobbying against school choice. And in the end, that has the potential to hurt students who would benefit from alternative forms of education.
Right. Because by limiting choice. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I'm going to say that perhaps the issue then is regulate lobbying. Like it's not inherent that, like, sure, it seems like, okay, I don't necessarily agree with the idea that teacher unions are inherently corrupted, but let's say for a matter of argument that they are, and they're using lobbying as a way to influence policy in government. Well, we also have massive corporations lobbying to influence policy in government to the negative effect. And honestly, it's gotten so bad that people believe that money is a valid form of free speech, that the corporation should be able to donate as much as it wants under a certain form, and that is a valid form of freedom of expression. Like,
I mean,
is how
there's a lot of U.S. law that's in case of law that dictate that to be the case. Now, you could say that needs to potentially be modified or regulated effectively, like in regards to the idea that corporations have freedom of speech, right? But I don't know how far you get with that, because there's a lot of shit that you'd have to start knocking the pins out of to get that. We could start with the idea that corporations shouldn't be awarded certain rights, and we can start talking about that because the idea that they're unending and effectively immortal organizations that could exist in perpetuity. And the ideas of extending rights to those types of organizations were never intended based upon the idea of what our current our constitutional rights were existence of, right? Like I would be more than happy to have that conversation, because I wholeheartedly agree with that idea. Because go ahead. I'm sorry.
We have the tools on the table to do that. Trust a legal precedent, trust busting in the early 20th century and the late 19th century was a very effective way at controlling the power of the corporation.
Absolutely.
I believe that we need something similar to it in the 2020s.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with you. We should re-energize the Sherman Antitrust Act and use it more effectively. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Because, the idea is that we want people to have freedom. We want people to be able to operate and do their things that they need. And when you're dealing with a concentration of wealth that's so goddamn big, like the mega corporations are, we have to start looking at the idea of, like, how do we allow the individual to be able to enact their voice and force these companies to change?
I believe. Okay, finish your point, but I believe Grayson has something to say when you're finished.
I'm actually done.
Oh, okay, Grayson, did you have something to add? I saw you raise your finger.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think we're looking at, when we talk about unions and the corporations and what's powerful, I think we should understand that we should have sort of a tri-force of power where like unions regulate both the government and the corporations, but then corporations can regulate some of the unions, but then government regulates both as well. I think we should,
like natural checks and balances in a sense, in an economic sense.
Yeah, I think we need more economic check and balances.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that one bit. However, I think it depends on how it's implemented.
There is definitely a bad way it could be handled. I think Amazon's handling of its unions is probably a prime example of negative interference that companies have with unions. Walmart's, we refuse to work with organized workers.
I worked for Walmart for 3 fucking days, and I was like, no, the way that they handle their anti-union bullshit was enough for me to say, fuck you guys, I'm out of here.
My late best friend, I remember, I think Damnation, I think you were one of the first people I talked to after.
I think you were, yeah.
Away. Yeah, no, but he worked at Walmart for an entire summer. He said it was the worst fucking experience he ever had. And then that's like one of the reasons he started drinking.
Yeah. Walmart's an atrocity of a corporation.
Yeah. No, I agree. You see, I don't like big government, but I also don't like large corporations. I see them as essentially the same thing, especially because oftentimes they work hand in hand and increase one another's powers.
Mm-hmm. Like corporate tax cuts and corporate subsidies are a way that big government will help the corporation. Meanwhile, they'll raise taxes and regulations on ordinary people through toll roads or consumption taxes, sales taxes, and blah, 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 blah. But then they'll cut taxes for the richest 1%. Like the bottom 50% of America now actually pays less income tax than billionaires. Look it up. As a less percentage of their income, the bottom 50% pays more than the billionaires in society. The top.
I think I have a very controversial take on taxes, because basically my take is, and Lapis and Grayson are especially going to, and especially Celestial are going to hate me for saying this, but I think basically if you have found a way to get out of paying taxes through loopholes or some other crazy scheme, I think basically you've won.
My
I
take:
guess.
abolish corporate and personal income tax.
I might agree with the income tax. I mean, okay, so I kind of agree with the income tax. Maybe like instead of national sales tax instead, or a consumption tax.
Land
Because
value
the thing is, like, the one problem with America right now is that it has no idea how to get money from itself. It has no idea how to. It does not know how to get money from taxes for
How would
a
you
variety
pay
of
for
reasons.
that? All of the
No, but I'm
cost of
saying, like,
revenue. No, I'm it's a question for Alkazi.
Oh, land value tax.
Oh,
interesting.
Georgist.
Like in the Georgist sense.
Yeah, but like I'm not really a philosophical Georgist. I don't like hate private property, and I don't hate like intellectual property rights. But I think generally land value tax, maybe a VAT as well, but I don't know. But I just want to find a way to get rid of personal income tax. Like if I had to decide to abolish personal income tax or corporate income tax, personal income tax is going first. But like I would like to abolish both. Replace it with land value tax, because like income taxes, there's so many problems with them.
Like what?
Well, for one, I don't like paying taxes, for one. Number two, I just don't. I think it disincentivizes work to a certain degree.
That's exactly what Mill's argument for a flat tax was.
Yeah.
I don't.
But I don't agree with his prescriptions. It's just that I just think a lot. I come with the Milton Friedman perspective on this. I think it's just the least bad tax, and I think it's probably the most efficient as well.
I mean, but Friedman was still for a low progressive tax. Like
Yeah,
he basically wanted to get rid of. Yeah, he wanted to get rid of like all welfare as it exists now and replace it with a negative income tax, which is a form of UBI, which is generally where I lean to, which is why I hesitantly support a quote unquote progressive tax. Because I mean, it would also save money if you got rid of all these bloated social welfare systems too. Again, This is definitely something that Celestial is going to disagree with me on. But I actually have met a lot of socialists who, like, for instance, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Ray Marasamy.
I am.
No, okay. So this is an area where I think she's actually pretty good on. Like, she actually, so for socialists, like, she supports free trade, number one. And then she also is for a Friedman-style negative income tax. And I've met quite a few other people who'd be to the left of Celestial, who have argued for the same thing, albeit they believe that it should be in addition to the current welfare programs that we have now. I mean, some of them think that it should be a replacement, but then a large percentage of them also agree that it should be on top of that, which I don't understand. But I mean, at least we agree on the model, and they can admit that they're influenced by.
Also, I want to another tax I would have supplement the
I would
abolition.
say I also fall under that, JR.
Okay.
That I also think that a UBI or a negative progressive, a negative income tax, in addition to, sorry, my allergies are.
No, I'm the same way. Don't worry.
Like, in addition to the social programs that we have currently, would be a good idea.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Also, I forgot to mention another tax I would like to implement to replace corporate and personal income tax is a carbon tax and some form of pollution tax.
Okay, so you know what?
Isn't a carbon tax essentially a pollution tax? Or are you also taxing
like carbon taxes? But putting more carbon in the atmosphere isn't the only form of pollution.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. Was you're also taxing other forms of pollution?
Yeah.
What do you think it could be useful to like just ban certain forms of pollution, just like straight up make it illegal?
Yeah, I'm not saying it shouldn't be illegal. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't like criminalize it, but like you should still pay for the ones where they can't ban or whatever. That you should still pay a tax for like using because you can't get rid of all carbon emissions, right? So so I still think there should be a carbon tax to incentivize the least amount of carbon use as possible. And to get more
what about
revenues.
areas that are high in carbon, like say fracking or coal burning plants?
In the long term, I want to ban coal immediately. Long term, ban fracking, but fracking is produces not the most amount of carbon emissions. So in the long term, I want to get rid of fracking, replace most forms of energy with nuclear power. But where we can, I want to use geothermal power, such as in Wyoming.
Have you ever considered tidal power?
Hydroelectricity.
I don't know anything about. I know what tidal power is, kind of, but I have not looked into it at all.
Isn't it kind of like hydroelectricity, where like the water pushes at the turbine, or my?
Yeah, but I'm a very pro nuclear guy.
Yeah.
Well, I believe in nuclear energy as well. There isn't really a very good argument against it unless we're saying, oh, well, where are we going to dump the toxic waste? In which case I'd say probably in some deserted region in the north of Canada and Russia and Greenland.
Maybe that's why we buy. Maybe that's why we buy Greenland.
And there's also the as you're mentioning, no doubt, that nuclear waste is becoming less and less of a factor due to advances in nuclear research.
And on top of that, it's so easy to store and contain nuclear waste. It's not even that much of a concern at this point. People are just so ignorant of how nuclear power works, and I fucking blame the Simpsons for that.
There's one thing that I will add, one caveat. I do not believe the placement of nuclear power plants is very important.
What do you mean?
Don't place them on fault lines.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, I can agree.
Well, also that, but also we need thorium power, please. Uranium-235. Don't get me wrong. Thorium is
thorium. What do you guys think of thorium? I was actually about
thorium
to
is epic. Thorium is very, very epic.
I do agree.
I will need to read up more on thorium. Sounds.
Oh my god, you're gonna love it. We're gonna thorium pill you.
Thorium pill. I like it.
Yeah, also, with nuclear, it has a rare type of thing where it's like it's the enemy to both the coal lobbyists and the hardcore environmental groups.
Yeah. No.
Nuclear certainly has an uphill battle, but that's why you should vote for Joe Biden to get more nuclear energy.
Does he support nuclear?
Yes, he does.
That is his
Joe
one
Biden
advantage over Bernard.
based.
His one advantage over Bernard is that he supports nuclear energy.
Bernie Sanders does not, which I don't understand. I mean, I feel like
ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Weird.
He has a few ridiculous positions, like not wanting to abolish drone strikes.
So, in a sense, you can argue that Bernie Sanders is almost a kind of reactionary in a way, not in the same sense Fogg is, but a reactionary in the sense that he supports, his form of democratic socialism is the support of stale 1970s style democratic socialism, and not not even what somebody like I'm trying to think of a good example.
Right.
I'm trying to think of an example of like a more modern form of it would be. I mean, I don't want to say Andrew Yang because he's certainly not a socialist, but a progressive like in the style of Tulsi Gabbard. Regardless of what you think of her, I know Alcazar despises her with all of his heart.
Base coconut milk mommy. Fucking love that chick.
Okay, yes, she has wonderful milkers, but that's beyond.
Yeah.
That's besides.
No, her policy is amazing. Are you kidding me?
She wants to ban guns. That's kind of cringe.
That is cringe.
That's that's the one policy I'll disagree with. We can throw that out to the side.
For all, extremely cringe. Very.
Okay.
What is cringe?
Right. Medicare for all.
Oh.
Also, her foreign policy.
Well, I disagree, but
yeah, I'm going to disagree as a Canadian.
Guys, let Celestial get a word.
Is her relationship with her former cult leader and
cult leader.
Former cult leader. What are you talking about?
I mean, I'd hardly call Hinduism a cult.
No, it wasn't that he was a Hindu. It was the kind of Hinduism he practiced was cultish.
So has she ever advocated for like that she's part of that anymore?
Not anymore.
Then what's it? Then I don't get
hang on. So her and her
one at a time, guys. One at a time.
So her and her husband are still friends with that guy and his wife.
Okay.
So this is a dude that has tried to push other politicians into prominence, into office. So this is, you can say that she is not, involved with that anymore. But being friends with the dude and his wife still, even to this day, it pretty much
Celestial, I don't want to straw man you here, right? But is there ever a possibility that you can be friends with somebody and never agree with them on anything in regards to like persuasion or influence? Like, can you be friends with someone and disagree with them completely? Is that ever a possibility?
Yeah, but what he's saying is, if you supposedly quote unquote left that like cult, but you're still friends with the leader, that's kind of sus.
Yes, 100%.
That's like, 100%. I understand guilt by association is bad, but like, if you fucking left Scientology, but you're still friends with like David Miscavige, like, I'm not gonna fully buy that you left Scientology.
Well, right, but then you would have to present evidence that they're in fact still being influenced by that person, right?
I understand that,
yeah.
But like, you can claim under the sun that you aren't being influenced, but like, if you're still friends with David Miscavige at the end of the day, I'm still gonna distrust you.
Oh,
yeah, David Miscavige is a scumbag.
That's fine to distrust it, but it's one of those things that like me personally, when I deal with any individual whatsoever, I don't prescribe the idea that just because they're associated with somebody, and I know you addressed this, I'm not trying to rehash this, but I don't prescribe the idea that just because you talk to somebody and you're friends with them, that they are actively trying to influence you. It's a possibility, but it's one of those things that I'm going to be skeptical, because I believe that inherently human beings are rational actors that look at someone like that and try to influence. Like, hold on a second here.
I gotta mute for a sec. I gotta call my roommate.
Yeah. So,
but this guy has a history of trying to push other one at a time.
I think Gracie was trying to speak, LSD. Yeah. I don't mean to be rude.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Wait,
it's okay.
I didn't.
I was just going to say that I think that it should be the policies of Tulsi Gabbard that should matter, and not necessarily what's going on in her personal life.
Yeah, plus we also need to remember that a lot of the, in regards to Gabbard, of course, a lot of the things that people believe of her, people see her, people believe the picture, the caricature that MSNBS paints of her. Like, for instance, and this is one of the hackiest arguments against her, I think. They say, oh, yeah, no, she was against gay marriage or whatever. And it's like, okay, who did
so was Barack Obama.
No, exactly. No, so I'm getting to this. It's like, whenever somebody makes that argument, I'm like, okay, who did you vote for back in 2016? They're like, oh, I voted for Hillary Clinton. Vote blue no matter who, dirt. And so I'm like, okay, Tulsi Gabbard came out in favor of gay marriage in 2006. Hillary Clinton did not come out in favor of gay marriage until it was politically expedient for her, which was about 2013, right before the Supreme Court started.
Coincidence? I think not.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Like, because this is the part that people fucking forget about, right? In 2008, Barack Obama, on the actual debate stage when he was running his campaign, said, "I am not in favor of gay marriage. What I am in favor of is civil unions. That marriage should be between a man and a wife, a man and a woman." And then, magically, as that court case progressed and he was paying attention to the political winds, magically his fucking administration became a pro-gay marriage fucking administration. It's like, hold on a second here. Did you, like spin to your base to get elected, and then when the political winds changed, you then became a hypocrite against your own stance? Which means I don't know what your real stance is in the first fucking place. So,
I mean, that's
personally, I think a lot of people did change their mind about gay marriage, and I don't believe that Obama was one of the ones who genuinely changed. I think he did it out of, I think most, if not all, politicians are opportunistic actors.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Of them. But no, I agree with you that Obama was being opportunistic. However, I do not necessarily hold it against people if they held nasty social beliefs at one time in their life, as long as they do not hold them at the present moment, and they are not holding them in private at the present moment, behind their back, lying about.
I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the Republicans too, who for years have been against gay marriage, are also privately in favor of gay marriage, but they're just trying to appeal to their Hicks
the evangelical Christians, absolutely.
Yeah, no. For instance, you have Al Hizzy, gay marriage leads to drag queen story hour, which leads to cuties. Okay, you know what? This actually raises a good point in the wider conversation we're having of liberalism. And I started to talk about this earlier, but okay, hold on a second. I'm going to pull up a graphic real quick. Hold on.
If I had to guess, I think I would probably guess Obama was in favor of gay marriage for most of his political career, but it would be suicide at when he started running to advocate for it. I don't know. That's the kind of vibes I get from him.
I mean, that's you implanting your personal desires onto a political figure. You
Absolutely.
wish Obama felt that way.
You're probably right, but I guess. Yeah.
But gay marriage is a fait accompli at this point.
Yeah.
It's not even an issue the political right is raising anymore. The new hot button topic is trans rights, specifically, trans people. Now this, private homeless shelters have the right to expel them.
Trans women are women and belong in the kitchen just like any other. That is.
So I don't let the head deceive you. I have a pretty nuanced take on the idea of trans rights, which is the idea that you can, socially, you can say what the fuck you are. I don't care about your pronouns. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to be affected by it, right? There's only two things I have an issue with. Is one, your documents in regards to your birth certificate, right? Those are sometimes things that need to be true, and allowing you to flip that shit around tends to mislead doctors. There are some potential health things that we have to consider by those documents, and that might be the only way that your doctor can get the appropriate information, right? And number two, the other one is, if I'm more than happy to use someone's pronouns. If I misgender somebody, right? If you present as a woman and I say hey miss, and then you jump down my throat I'm a dude. And I'm like, hold on a second here. You presented as that, and I'm reading what my eyes tell me. Don't jump down my throat. I'm going to be an asshole back.
Also, guys, if you're a trans woman.
Would that be an ethical sort of correction?
I just want to say there should be certain rules in place, just unspoken rules. If you're a trans woman and you identify as a woman, walk the walk. Don't you need to shave. Most of them do, but I've seen some trans women who have beards still. It's okay, so if you're going to have people who are confusing, you're going to get outraged at people who are confusing you for a male, shave your damn beard. It's not their fault in that case.
Okay. As a trans woman, I think that there's a bit of a nuance here.
Sure.
Obviously, if someone calls me the wrong name, just like if someone, let's say, from behind, they called you a woman and you turned around and they still were calling you a woman, let's say they had some sort of weird issue with their sight or something.
Yeah.
And you said, no, actually, I'm a guy. I don't think that would be rude. Now, of course, there's always people who, give them an inch to be angry about something and they'll take it a while.
Absolutely.
And that I don't necessarily see as a political issue. I see it more as an ethical issue. It's more of you seem like a bad person. as regards to the documents, I can see where you're coming from. My only thing would be if, say, someone is a intersex. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the condition.
I am familiar with it.
If you have, by and large, transitioned, would it be acceptable to say, okay, this is a female to male transgender person, or this is an intersex individual, because this is more useful information for doctors to have on the card, as opposed to saying, oh, this is just a male, even though this is an intersex person that was kind of pushed into that category, but they don't necessarily really even have male genitalia.
Gotcha. So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. Like basically, what you're saying is that we create on someone's birth certificate the idea that they originally were like female and transitioned to male. Is like something like that. That wouldn't bother me at all, because you're absolutely correct. It provides a more correct piece of information, because it allows a doctor to be able to see the thing that their genetics are going to present out, and that they've also adhered to a transitional surgery or hormone replacement therapy that did that. And I wouldn't be opposed to that, because the idea is that we need to present trans people with enough, the doctors with the correct information to be able to properly treat people. And other than that, the rest of it's just social issues, and I tend to be rather socially libertarian about the idea, and also almost socially progressive in regards to social issues for it. Yeah.
Well, then again, you could also just use gender-neutral terms, and then no one can complain about you misgendering them.
Well, gender-specific terms are useful in language. So, I don't want to get rid of that. Gender norms, we could have that conversation, but I don't really want to have that conversation right now. But yeah.
Now, maybe this is getting a bit off topic from liberalism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the graphic I have up right now is a quote from the. So he was a conservative political scientist in the 20th century by the name of James Burnham. Some of you might have heard of him. I mentioned him earlier, but so he wrote this. So, you know how most of today's, especially coming from the right, these books are like, why are liberals destroying America, and are just really grifty works that have no substance whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
Well,
my wife. I love college.
Yeah. Well, Burnham, for instance, he actually had. So, he was of the right. He was a classical liberal. He used to be a Trotskyist, but then he became more of a classical liberal in economics. So he wrote this fantastic book called The Suicide of the West, which
you read Managerial Revolution?
I have not yet. But Suicide of the West was a critique of liberalism, and then he gave a really interesting definition of it. And he said it is the ideology of Western suicide. I don't necessarily agree with him 100%, but I see where he's going with this. By liberalism, he actually meant what we refer to today as progressivism. He was not talking about classical liberalism, because he himself was a classical liberal. But so he talked about what it does is, since liberalism, it has no end goal. It only seeks to keep reforming and reforming and reforming. So it's basically being driven by society, but as a corollary, it ends up legitimizing oftentimes some of society's worst beliefs as well. And I think that he's kind of valid in some regards, especially with that. Here's one example that pertains to today, specifically today, as in this day we're in right now.
Current year.
The current day, actually. Is everyone familiar? I mean, we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but is everyone familiar with the film Cuties?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
pedophilia fucking propaganda right there. That's what that is.
And you're seeing a lot of websites nowadays in the mainstream media. Fortunately, everybody is more or less actually opposed to it and is kind of seeing through. And I am so glad that is the case, at least in this instance.
Right.
But you're having websites that are calling it a right-wing smear campaign against media, when that's not true at all.
Right.
But I think this is kind of interesting. Basically, you're seeing it's starting to normal, some aspects of the establishment in the media starting to normalize certain things. And this is really what Burnham was getting at. He had nothing but positive things to say about classical liberals, like people like John Stuart Mill, John Locke, F.A. Hayek, those guys. But then you also have those who are advocating for certain things that could ultimately be detrimental to society in the end. And I think this is the Cuties is the perfect example of that.
No, yeah.
Like, and then this is what Al Hizzy,
I'm gonna go to bed.
Al Hizzy and
Good night, dude.
So I don't necessarily agree. I know he's good night. He was being a bit hyperbolic about this. But gay marriage leads to drag queen story hour leads to Cuties. I mean, I'm for gay marriage.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of.
But the thing is, it might incrementally, just the entropy, gradually start to normalize other things, and so like there's sort of like a curve, like a bell curve, so to speak. So you get to the top, and it's like, okay, here's like the golden mean. Like these are the reasonable things right here. But then eventually, the reasonable things will. Eventually, it'll keep going forward very slowly, and then something that is sort of related will become normalized, but something that is inherently negative. Like, for instance, I mean, I've seen today, for instance, like, I mean, and I'm not even joking. I'm not even being hyperbolic here when I say that there are certain elements who are trying to. Has everybody heard of maps before?
Yes.
Yeah, minor attractive persons. In part influenced by 4chan, in part people who have jumped on a 4chan bandwagon and genuinely believe the ideology, who have genuinely bought the nonsense. Now, here's an interesting thing. I would say that liberalism is actually people waking up and realizing that pedophilic social relations have been normalized for a very long time, and that it's time to push back against it. You know, I would say that rather than gay marriage, the flashpoint is all these child beauty pageants. These have been going on for ages. We've been sexualizing children for a very, very long time, even back to when, I think it was in the 70s. There was this child who was, I was a teenager in this ad, and she was like, you know what gets between me and my Calvins? Nothing. And this was like a 14-year-old girl in the ad basically saying, I'm naked underneath my jeans.
Right.
Pedophilia is being used to sell. Yeah. So this is nothing new. Like the Birmingham groomer gang, the Catholic Church sexual assault scandals, did these arise because, oh my goodness, gay marriage is here now? No. The exploitation of children has been a segment of society for a very long time. Liberalism is the pushback against this. This is progress to say no to this. Cuties is a reactionary piece.
Interesting.
I appreciate that take, because I wholeheartedly agree with it, because as a society, even though, like, as I said, I tend to be socially liberal in the idea that, like, you could pretty much do what you want in the comfort of your own home within reason, right? We as a society have to draw lines, because anything beyond this particular point will degrade and destroy common culture in society, that if we cannot allow to happen, because the human race should perpetuate and be able to continue. Therefore, we need a society as we evolve through that, and we have to draw limits. We have to say that these certain things are beyond the pale. And without being able to do that, we just fucking fall apart.
So, Fogg, as a Catholic, what would you have to say about that? Because she did bring up pedophilia in the Catholic Church, and I know your religion means a lot to you. And I just want to hear what your general take on that is, and whether you agree with her. Whether
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think it might not have been working earlier. I mean, on the Catholic Church bit, I think that priests are males and they tend to have male targets, so there's probably a homosexuality link there. But leaving that aside, I think that with the general trend, I think I said it earlier, the processes that you get within liberalism, where you have coalitions forming on the bottom half of the status hierarchy, as those sites gain status, you have to keep digging deeper down and down into the status hierarchy to find more people for your coalition. And so, I mean, pedophiles are pretty down low in the hierarchy. So
they're the first to go. They're the first
Are they
to get
really?
killed.
Bill
They're the first to get.
Clinton used to be a president.
They're the
Jeff
first to get
Sessions
killed.
traveling in the circles of highest power.
No, he has a point.
Pedophiles
He
are
has
the
a point
highest
there.
echelons of power.
I mean,
They're
I
not
think
socially oppressed
I
at
think you could
all.
say
anyone?
open pedophiles might be better. Like, there are a lot of people in Congress who historically who have been not open homosexuals, right?
Lindsey Graham.
And there still are, right? Obviously, Cory Booker, but
Well, he has a girl. He has like a. He's married to that like one lady now or something.
Sure.
He's probably bi though. Honestly, he's probably bi.
And all power to him.
I'll give. Well, whatever.
Do you think that maybe? Do you think that maybe, like in regards to the Catholic Church, do you think that maybe there would be some alleviation of that sort of thing if, and again, this is going to be very controversial, especially because I know you're a very religious person, but maybe if the Church changed their stance on gay marriage, or maybe didn't say it was good, but maybe just said, okay, we're going to take a step back here. We're not going to endorse it, but we're also not going to, like treat it like as it has been treated historically, like as taboo as it currently is. Maybe if they just took us, maybe they became, no pun intended, agnostic on the issue.
So there's a couple of points on that. One is that I think that we're probably at the high point right now of global social LGBT acceptance. I think it's mainly like a bourgeois cultural hegemony that's pushing that forward. And I think as China becomes more of the primary hegemon, we're going to see that less and less. So I'm not overly worried about, the Catholic Church being pressured to pay lip service to gay marriage, but I suppose you never know. As far as its relationship to pedophilia, I mean, I think that's largely a result of the church having had a lot of social prestige without a lot of social accountability like they had previously. And so, if you have an organization where you can be a community member and you have access to children, right? Or like a high member of the community and you have access to children, you're going to attract people who want to exploit that institution for that end.
Exactly. It's reactionary. It's the ancient power of the Catholic Church gave predators an opportunity. They took it, and then liberalism shined a light on this weakness within the reactionary institution, and Catholicism was pressured to change.
So that goes exactly
have a
to
higher per capita rate of child predatory behavior than the Catholic Church does. So I don't think it's inherently caused by reactionary structures.
What has a higher rate of per capita?
Teachers' unions in the United States.
Public school teachers in general.
Well, yeah, teachers is another kind of institution, and there's actually been a lot of pushback against the lack of accountability that teachers get. And if liberalism is the ideology of the free market, it would naturally stand to reason that opening schools up to more market forces, pressuring these teacher unions and pressuring teachers to be more accountable would be entirely within liberalism's framework. So you're strengthening my argument.
I mean, I was using the teachers union as an example of something that I don't think you can call reactionary, at least in any traditional sense. I mean, if you're trying to define, an institution as reactionary, right, and support, then I suppose we can bend the definition that direction. But I don't think that's how the term's traditionally used.
Mm-hmm. But who makes up the teachers union?
A lot of pedophiles, but teachers.
I think that is a good analogy to
and
compare it to the church.
itself has changed drastically. during the last 20 years or so. And that includes calls for the teachers' union to be more accountable, as well as changes in curriculum, kind of shepherding out a lot of the remnants of old propaganda and leading to new curriculums and new voices finally being heard.
Yeah.
So, like,
I don't actually think I disagree with you too much,
inherently
actually.
a reactionary thing, but I think you can say, when you look at older schools, they had a very sort of very, very different. Like if you went to a school in the 1960s, the early 1960s, you might see physical discipline being done on students. They would be taught all sorts of things that are completely different from what they're learning now about the Reconstruction period of history. You know, there would be prayer in schools. In other words, reactionary.
So
I think we need to differentiate reactionary from conservative right here, because for instance, you have is everyone familiar with Michael Malice?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so there's the quote, probably the best quote: "Conservatism is progressivism driving the speed limit." Because the thing is, you always have the progressives who are ultimately pushing for certain things, and then conservatism ultimately comes and takes the position that maybe the progressives previously held. And,
right. Yeah.
And then also, so personally, I don't consider myself a reactionary. With the exception of the fact that I want to restore classical liberalism. So I guess in that sense, you could consider
radical alt-centrists unite tomorrow.
Yeah, no, but anyway, so
a liberalist, if you will.
A liberalist.
Ooh, someone aware of that term.
But anyway, but I think, so speaking of reaction, so you have reactionary theory, particularly in Curtis Yarvin. I don't know if you could say tradition, but Mencius Moldbug, he's better known as, that's the name he's better known as, but talks about how ultimately the entropy of Western civilization, so to speak, from an ideological perspective, always seeks to drive quote unquote left. And the Distributist had a very good video on this as well.
You know Dave?
What? Oh, I don't know him personally, but I do know people who are friends with him. So
I know him.
But he did have a good video that talked all about that, and then that also kind of goes to again back to what Burnham said about the ideology of suicide, and like also Michael Malice's quote. Things can all tie together. So would you guys agree that that this is generally an accurate assumption, or because I think it's a little more complex than that personally, and I also think you should differentiate between liberalism as a political ideology and liberalism as a philosophical ideology.
Right. Mm-hmm. No, I wholeheartedly agree with what you just said there, and I understand what this thing is saying, and it's boiling it down into a very succinct like micro point. But inherently, the idea there is that it's looking at the idea that we can logically look at society, right, and politics and other things, and figure out that there are things that exist in society that are inherently good, that exist, that were created in the past, right? And we can also acknowledge that there are things that need to be changed. When we're doing that, we basically set aside the things that don't work anymore. We change them, reform them, and keep the things that work, that were created in the past because they need to be there. And that's just basically conservatism. They're not saying that that things don't need to be reformed. We're saying that we need to be smart about it when we reform it to make sure that we understand the full context of what we're changing, why we're changing it, and how we're going to do it. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And
I mean, it's not like everything in the past is bad and everything in the present is good. After all, the Greeks and Romans had quite a much more libertarian understanding of homosexual relations than people in the 19th century.
Victorians,
So I don't necessarily think that I'm for a full-throated rejection of the past. Everything that is new is good. Everything that is old is bad. And conservatism has not always been bad. It hasn't never done good. There is sometimes ideas that are presented as progress that are not progress at all. Like in the 70s, there was a bunch of French intellectuals who signed this petition to lower the age of consent to 13 in France.
Was it like the postmodern movement?
Oh yes, and second wave feminists, of which a tradition which I am very critical for obvious reasons. But anyway, no, that was an instance where conservatives were right to say, look, there's a lot of pedophilia going on now. NAMBLA actually had influence in the 70s.
Ooh.
Nowadays, honestly, no, not really. NAMBLA,
I think the last time that they were mainstream was South Park,
organization.
and that was to make fun of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And rightly so. Like that's an organization that needs to be criticized and ridiculed for even fucking existing, because that's an absurd.
Kind of like Cuties. I think Cuties would be another good example.
Be allowed to exist, in my opinion. It is, toxic. Don't get me wrong. However, I really don't see that pedophilia should really essentially be tied to queerness. I think that is a thing that social conservatives like to do, and it's weird.
I appreciate that.
Anyone can be a pedophile. You can have a man attracted to a younger woman. You can have a woman attracted to a younger boy. You can have creepy male teachers attracted to creepy male students, and creepy female attractors attracted to creepy females, creepy female teachers attracted to younger female students. Pedophilia does not have a gender. Pedophilia does not have a sexuality. It is a social evil.
Yes, 100% agree.
Yeah.
Why does this need to be said in the 21st century?
That's another point I like to bring up. Is like, why the fuck is this even a conversation to be had?
Come on, it's the current year.
No, it's crazy that this is a conversation that we even have to fucking have.
Calm down.
No, I understand, Amir. I'm just like that's one of the things that I want to make sure that I bring up and like resoundingly smack the fucking table on. Because it's an absurd thing that we even have to have this conversation in the first fucking place.
Exactly. Pedophilia is something that should have been rooted out ages ago, just like bestiality, just like any sort of, social predatory behavior.
Just relax, man. Just.
Oh no, I appreciate actually his passion. It's very important to be passionate in condemnation of pedophilia.
I just wrote that.
But yeah, so, hold on. So, who's been, okay, so Gaius, so just looking at the comments, Gaius here says, when you've been arguing for moral subjectives the entire time, you have to double down on facing something objective. Yes, exactly. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, that's the reasoning is and Gaius Macanus actually brought up another point further up in the chat about it being the Cuties is being embraced by the leftists, not to embrace liberalism but to own the conservative, right? Like because their chain of logic locks them into this particular position, right? They have to make these arguments because they can't lose face, because they can't lose power. Because if you think about it from the idea of how the regressive left actually works, it is an inherently a neo-Hegelian idea where they're operating under the only thing that is real in society is power. So we have to obtain power, and how do we do that? And once you start dealing with moral subjectitude, you can basically justify anything to achieve power, because that's the only thing that allows you to gain your to affect reality and how you want to have happen. And when you start getting locked into these particular arguments, even something that we can objectively agree is just disturbingly wrong inside the society, they are obligated to make these arguments because they don't want to lose the power that they've gained to be able to enact the social changes that they want. And it's fucking disgusting.
So, Grayson, continue laughing.
This own the other side thing is something I've noticed a lot lately, center, left, and right. And it's
libs, guys.
Toxic, and it leads to justification of all sorts of horrible behaviors from the in-camp to work against the out-camp. I've seen a lot of people, like as a regressive far lefty, I've seen a ton of people. Not one of them has voiced support of Cuties on my timeline.
That's a good thing. I appreciate that.
Yeah, like it's possible. I just have a very well curated timeline. I don't know. Like, honestly, the reason media organizations tend to be, very far behind the curve when it comes to pedophilia is that in general they're a bit far behind the curve in all sorts of social behaviors.
That's fair.
And because, well, who are they owned by? The rich. Who are pedophilias right now mainly? The rich.
Pizzagate, cough, cough.
And I hate.
No, I don't buy into pizza. I thought that was kind of stupid, but I mean, I do think that there is something there in like the more abstract sense, in that there definitely are a lot of elite pedos, and you see that with Epstein, who
definitely killed himself.
I was about to say he definitely killed himself, guys.
Oh yeah, not a shred of doubt. He just one day up and decided to kill himself. So convenient.
Speaking of which, I actually do
might have been an accident.
On Twitter, I have a Twitter follow. We're mutual followers. We followed each other for years. So they're the conspiracy theorists at this point because they keep insisting that Epstein actually did kill himself.
I actually believe he killed himself.
Oh, you're so funny.
I have to ask this: are you trolling? Because if you are, just say it now and we'll move on. If you're not, we actually have to kind of dive into this.
Oh, I'm not really. No, I'm not trolling. I actually do believe.
You actually believe the official story?
Yeah.
Why?
He buys the Fed propaganda.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, okay, the one instance I can see
does not interest me, and other reason is I don't really actually care about Epstein.
The one instance I can see him actually killing himself in is if, like, he had his lawyer bring him a cyanide pill because he figured suicide is better than getting anally raped in jail.
Well, here's the thing: is he already pulled off a reduced sentence once by squealing because he had power on someone, right? Like, that's the whole reason why he got such a light sentence the first time, is because he had dirt on somebody that allowed him to be able to leverage that into getting a light sentence. So why wouldn't he just pull the same thing again, right?
Oh, I know. They make cuties to normalize pedophilia, and so when Maxwell outs them as pedophiles...
It's like, okay, so speak to cuties for a second. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of, and I'm going to make a video about this also, but it reminds me of, like, so they basically say, oh no, we're making cuties because we want to show, like, we want to show you guys how bad it is people to, like, sexualize children.
By sexualizing children.
Like, no, it reminds me of when I was a kid. So do you guys remember that, like, that dumbass Canadian show Caillou?
Oh, everyone.
Oh God.
Caillou.
Okay,
Caillou.
so with Caillou, so I used to watch Caillou even up to when I was like 8. But the thing is, I said that I watched it because to make fun of it, but I legitimately found it, like, entertaining in, like, a very weird sort of way. That's what it reminds me of.
Oh, did anyone watch Cuties?
No,
I haven't seen it. I'm not going to.
I'm not going to.
Why would I want to increase the traffic if I watch the property? Then I'm saying, Netflix, continue to do this because your controversy mongering will generate clicks and will generate money for you.
My friend Larry watched it and he just said the main protagonist is insufferable.
If any of my friends watch it, I have to kill them.
That's a hot take. That's a nuclear take.
What if it was actually created? What if it was actually created on purpose in order to monitor who is watching it, and then they?
Oh, so it's a honeypot?
Yeah.
I don't think Netflix is that smart.
No. It was bankrolled by the CIA. The CIA hired Netflix as a contractor.
You'd have to present evidence of that because hilariously, that would be funny if it was. It's like
not competent enough to pull something like that off.
Yeah. It's like To Catch a Predator on a grand scale using Netflix, right? Like, you want to talk about some fucking cool ass shit if that's actually the case. I don't believe that to be true, but it would be hilarious if it was.
Yeah, I don't. Caillou's parents were, like, pussy whipped by Caillou.
Yeah.
I always thought that Caillou was obscenely spoiled as a child, and I'm like, oh, my parents are nothing like this at all. What is going on in my life? Caillou is such a brat, and he gets treated so well, but I do like literally nothing, and they'll get angry at me. I was actually, that kind of made me more angry at Caillou, was the exceptional treatment he got from his parents.
Oh God, yeah. And it was like.
But I also thought that it was acceptable because he was about to die of cancer.
True, he does have leukemia.
Ooh.
That's
yeah. I can speak from experience. When someone has cancer, the parents do a lot nicer.
Yeah, they're trying to make his last days more bearable.
Yeah.
It takes on a much more joyous cast when you present it like that.
And dark. Not to mention dark.
It's dark, but it makes things a lot nicer.
Yeah, it's better than these parents are just completely incompetent and are creating a monster.
Yeah, that's true. But okay, so there is actually a funny YouTube series called like Caillou the Adult.
Oh, yes.
And
so he survived through the leukemia?
Yeah, he's in his 20s and he's like still lives at home, and
of course,
he goes on a date with Dora the Explorer, who's like an alcoholic or something.
Well, maybe the chemo.
Well, like why is Dora got to be an alcoholic, man? Like that's rude. Like I don't understand where Dora would be an alcoholic based upon the show.
It's because it's edgy, it's cynical. See, we're taking this icon from your youth and we're making them.
And we're just gonna shit on it. Okay, fair enough.
Postmodernism, guys.
Yeah, it's not like in Hungary, it's the exact opposite.
Postmodernist.
Postmodern neo-Marxist, bucko.
Yikes! Big fucking yikes!
No, I'm just joking.
No, I knew you were joking. And also when the Politicrat brought that up, like, I know he was joking too. It's just like someone's got to say yikes on that shit.
Yeah.
So Damnation.
What's up, man?
So I see that you're a Trump supporter now.
Yep.
So
I voted. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know you've been a Trump supporter, but I just want to say, so do you still consider yourself a liberal?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so what is your justification for voting for Trump over Biden? I mean,
for voting for Trump over Biden.
Correct.
When we look at a lot of the existing thing, like the existing information from like the two parties, right? When I tend to be more of a classically liberal person first, right? And the idea of freedom, maximizing freedom to the most rational, logical conclusion that we can get to, right? You start to end up in areas where like the social justice warriors tend to start oppressing the ideas of free speech and start oppressing these inherent freedoms, right? And when we start to do that, those things have to be like smacked back, and they have to be beaten and put back in the box to say there's a line here. We can't go beyond this, or we're going to destroy society. And when I originally in 2016 I was a Bernie Sanders supporter because I agreed with a lot of the policies he was talking about, and he didn't really have a lot of adoption of the racial identitarian nonsense, as well as the progressive some of the progressive ideas that were inherently about like the idea that the systemic racism is a thing and things like that. So when he started to adopt those things in this particular run, as well as the last 4 years, it started to those inherently dangerous ideas started to pervade the Democratic Party. We have to look at it from a perspective of that you're going to start imposing on people's freedoms to make some of these changes, and we can't allow that to happen. So it has to be in good conscience, based upon my principles as a classical liberal, I had to flip. Because I can't, I hate social justice warriors, and I hate regressive ideologies.
So Damnation. So you don't think systemic racism exists?
I do not believe that systemic racism exists, and if it did, we abolished it back in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, when we outlined that inherently that if we could demonstrate that it exists in the government, that we can then sue that person and seek reparations through that.
So I do think that. Oh, Fogg. Sorry. Go on.
So, whence comes the economic inequalities? If not from the system?
Personal choice.
It's all a matter of personal choice.
It's all a matter of personal choice.
That seems honestly a bit reductionist. Can you elaborate?
Oh, on the fact that it's personal choice.
Yeah.
So when we start looking at wealthy African Americans, right? They do exist, and they have overcome these horrible conditions. Because one of the major factors that determines someone rising out of poverty is the idea of the nuclear family, having a mother and a father, or we'll call it just two parental figures in existence, right? And when we look at the marriage, the divorce rates that exist in the Black community, right, those are astronomical, right? And I don't know if it's a cultural thing or what, but the idea is that these people are inherently being held back by a overarching authority in the government or in capitalism doesn't bear out when we start to look at those particular data points, because, as I said, it's a situation where divorce rates tend to be one of those things that we do that. So
Sorry,
go ahead.
So you think that across the board that the entire African American community has looked at the statistics, said, yeah, we're going to choose the route that is going to lead our communities to have higher poverty?
I just think they're uneducated. So you
think that there's like a system that
I was about to say,
failing them.
Let me turn this on its head. Let me turn this on its head for a second. So the Great Society ended up, whether it was intentional or not, I personally think that it was intentional on the part of Lyndon B. Johnson.
Sure.
I think he was an opportunist. I think that he was just, the welfare system was, as we know it today, was to farm the African American vote, number one. There's a quote. I mean, it's hazy as to whether or not he actually said it. It was about I don't want to get canceled in the future, so I'm not going to say exactly what it is.
Do you want me to say it? Do you want me to say it? Because I got the N-word pass and everything.
I don't think that's YouTube TOS appropriate.
But basically,
in general, you're probably better off not saying it.
Yeah. So he said it was like, after I pass this, we're gonna have these N-words voting Democrat for the next 100 years.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So it's hasn't been proved. Like, I mean, it hasn't been proven that he actually said it or not. But I'm leaning towards he probably did, because he was known for saying remarks that were very, very similar to that. So I think he did say something along those lines. I have no doubt in my mind. But
no, he's a southern guy from Texas. He's clearly not racist.
Yeah, exactly.
No racist there.
No, but so plus he was segregationist adjacent. He caucused with.
He's a Democrat in the '60s. Go figure.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that so like I said, let me turn this on its head for a second. So implementing those policies, in a lot of ways, the Great Society was kind of a replacement for Jim Crow, to find a new way to systemically keep them, almost to lock them into a caste almost. And would you say that intentionally building a system that creates dependency in order to keep minorities locked in this sort of perpetual struggle to make social mobility more difficult, would you not call that a form of systemic racism?
If you can point to me that exists, right? The Civil Rights Act of 1964 allows you to upend that and destroy it.
Yeah, no, but I mean, the thing is, but it was implemented by those who were in power. I mean, even if it didn't have necessarily an inherently racist intention, it still had outcomes that are quote unquote racist. Like, I mean, even if
I don't give a fuck about outcomes. The idea is the intent.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But the thing is,
interesting, because it's the exact opposite of my approach.
I think what we should do though is we should, and I feel like people use this term and when they say this, they mean these two concepts interchangeably. But I think we should differentiate between systemic racism and cultural racism. So
Okay.
I think that we do have in the quote unquote the system, there are certain racist policies, so to speak, in a lot of regards, and
Okay.
they might not be as overt as they once were. I'm looking at Jim Crow in this perspective, but so we don't necessarily have, or so we might have policies that are created, even if it's not based out of some sort of like hatred or prejudice. It might be based out of some sort of desire to keep for the elite to stay in power. I mean, still, I mean, maybe racist isn't the best way to put it, but then also we need to look at cultural racism too. Now, I do not believe we live in a racist culture, and here is why. Because would a racist culture call out its own racism? I think we have racist elements in our culture, but as a culture, we are not inherently racist because there is no other culture on earth that is so obsessed with ending racism as that of the Western world.
Absolutely.
And whereas you look at China, for example, China is so racist that there is not even a concept of racism in China.
Well, I do remember there was this little exhibit where they would say it was the faces of Africa, and it was faces of like different kinds of monkeys juxtaposed with faces of African tribesmen. And yeah, that was actually in 2019 that was done. But anyway, in regards to, I think it was your point about, let's see, going back, I'm trying to, like, because there was a lot of things that were said before I make my say. I think it had to do with you believe that Donald Trump will, you know, unlike Joe Biden, who you see as kind of succumbing to regressive ideas. You say Donald Trump is someone who can see a bit more of a firmer stance on free speech. You think he's very big on it.
Yep.
I would say look at his recent tweets on critical race theory. Look at his recent efforts to look at support for BDS in universities, and look at the sort of laws that are on the book in Texas and that have been passed and encouraged by the Trump administration to censor speech and employment opportunities for people who support BDS. And come back to me on whether Donald Trump actually has a rather good record on freedom of speech, or honestly, I'd say it's even worse than Obama's.
Well,
I'd actually agree with that.
Speech, it is important to maintain the freedom of speech of people I disagree with. You're a Trump supporter. You disagree with me on numerous things. That's fine. You still deserve a platform. You still deserve a right to speak. However, in turn, just because I believe things that you might say are regressive, I deserve a platform. I deserve the right to speak. I don't deserve to be fired from my job just because I support sanctions on Israel or because I believe in critical race theory.
Okay, so so on that note, for the next couple minutes, I just want to show. So I think Lapis brings up a good point here, but I just want to show two videos juxtaposed with each other that I think are absolutely hilarious, and it just kind of shows that that contradiction. What I believe is a contradiction in terms of Donald Trump's with his belief. Hold on a second.
Sure.
I need to find a good. Where is it? Shit, I need to find a good one. Okay.
Hey, Dakota's here.
All right. Here we go.
David, you're a great gentleman. Justice Kavanaugh, fully respected. They didn't just try to win, they tried to destroy him with false and malicious accusations. They tried to ruin the family of now Justice Kavanaugh. They tried to ruin his career. They tried to ruin his life. They even wanted to impeach him on fraudulent charges. Those charges were a fraud. He did nothing wrong, all in pursuit of political domination and control. Just imagine what this angry left-wing mob would do if they were in charge of this country. Imagine if we had a Democrat president and a Democrat Congress in 2020. They would shut down your free speech, use the power of the law to punish their opponents, which they're trying to do now anyway. They'll always be trying to shield themselves. They would strip Americans of their constitutional rights while flooding the country with illegal immigrants in the hopes it will expand their political base and they'll get votes someplace down the future. That's what it's about.
Let's put the thumbs down. He's like, okay, fine, thumbs down.
And we are building the wall. We're going to have over 400 miles of wall built by the end of next year. It's moving rapidly. Moving very rapidly.
You think Trump aged badly or fine? Like
both.
And you know, we couldn't get the wall approved by the
What do you mean
Democrats.
I don't know.
Even though they voted
I
for it
just
4
can't tell.
years ago and 6
I don't
years
really
ago,
focus on his
it
looks.
Didn't get built, but they voted for it. All of
Not
a
very
sudden,
attractive
Trump
man,
is
is he?
president. We don't want a wall. Can you imagine? Can you imagine those caravans without having the barriers and walls that we've already put up and that are up? This country would be a mess like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, America's not a mess right now.
So the wall is moving along. It's moving along rapidly. It's beautiful. Change the design.
My
It's
favorite part of
stronger,
Trump's rhetoric is when he says
bigger,
the wall is beautiful.
better, and
Like, who
cheaper.
cares if it's beautiful? Like, it's supposed to do a job, isn't it? It's so pretty. You won't believe how good
Okay.
it is.
So there, Trump is talking about Democrats wanting to take away free speech. Okay.
Sure.
But then right here, all right, hold on a second. I'm gonna. It's just. I think this is hilarious. Hold on. Whoops. Hold on.
Boop-a-doop-a-doop, boop-a-doop-a-doop.
That's a good show. Used to watch it religiously when I was growing up.
I don't know if this was the same speech, but but like in my head canon it is.
It doesn't look like it, but
Tore down a statue of Thomas Jefferson. Now we're getting into the real stuff. They decapitated a statue of Christopher Columbus, except in New York when the Italians surrounded it. They didn't have too much of a chance. Those Italians, I love the Italians. They heard they were going to rip down their beautiful Christopher Columbus, so all of a sudden they circled that thing. They didn't do too well in hurting Christopher, did they? Thank you to our Italian population. We're very proud of you, right? 2 days ago, leftist radicals in Portland, Oregon, ripped down a statue of George Washington and wrapped it in an American flag and set the American flag on fire. Democrat, all Democrat. Everything I tell you is Democrat. And you know, we ought to do something, Mr. Senators. We have two great senators. We ought to come up with legislation that if you burn the American flag.
Shit.
Wow, even YouTube is disgusted with his hypocrisy.
American flag, you go to jail for 1 year. 1 year.
Wow. Wow, that's unconstitutional. But okay.
Yeah.
Weird flag.
Jim and James.
You got always got
Jim and James. We ought to do it. You know, they
I think
talk
that
about
was
freedom
my
of
idea.
speech, and I'm a big believer in freedom of speech.
But you want
that's desecration. That's a terrible thing they do.
not
We used to have things. We don't have them anymore because we want to be so open, so everything. And look what happens. We should have legislation that if somebody wants to burn the American flag and stomp on it, but just burn it, they go to jail for 1 year. Okay?
Is that okay? Like, how is that?
No. Okay, so he's literally contradicting himself there.
Yes, he is. He absolutely is.
No, the thing that gets me, and I don't know if nobody, I've never seen anybody point this out, but what he says is anybody who wants to burn the American flag. He doesn't say anybody who does burn the American flag, but he says
If they can express a desire to,
that's like thought. So that's a thought crime.
Like
I know he probably worded it wrong. He didn't mean to word it like that.
Yeah.
That's what it's. I just think it's funny.
A good
that that's how it
interpretation is that
came
if
out like
people who do go out and burn the flag on
Right.
or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, me personally, I'll first off, anybody who I personally don't believe you should burn the flag or desecrate the flag, but based on the laws that the Supreme Court of the United States have outlined, it is something that is considered freedom of speech. I believe that Donald Trump misspoke, not even misspoke, but either was just blatantly wrong in that particular situation, and it should not have advocated for a policy stating that you can't, that you should go to jail for that, right? Because there might be a situation that, as a conservative, right, that I inherently disagree with the way that the government is going, and I might choose to make that same protest by lighting the flag on fire, right? And I don't agree with putting people in prison or jail for violations of freedom of speech, making political protests, right? I don't agree with that.
It's about. I mean, it's clearly about power, right? If you want power, you should ban the speech of your enemies, and you should advocate for your own free speech, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you want.
But yeah, the whole point is that we have to have a certain set of principles, and even if our political leaders and perhaps even our political movements all verge towards we need more power, crush our opponents, the whole point, I think at least of this channel here, is that we want to move a bit beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So yeah, that's why I think. So the thing is with Joe Biden, I really don't know what to think of him at this point. I'm not going to vote for him, but
I don't think he knows what to think of himself.
The thing is, I wish Alcazar were here. I wish
very
Alcazar
clearly
were
a senile old man.
Yeah, I wish Alcazar were still here to put in a word on that. Because I know he's like
Biden stan.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why somebody. I can understand, and this goes the same with Hillary Clinton. I said this back in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, but I can understand why somebody would be a Trump fan, but I don't understand why somebody would be a Biden fan. As in a fan in the same way that people are fans of Trump. I understand why people would want to vote for him, but the thing is, I don't understand how somebody can be a legitimate fan of Joe Biden.
I mean, that's a good question. That's a good question. Who is a fan of Joe Biden?
People who want Obama but can't vote for him again.
Yeah,
that's not. You know what? I would vote. I'd vote for Obama for a third term if I could.
Yeah, people who say that.
No, I'm Joe. I mean, I'm not saying me, but I have heard people say that.
I know you're not saying that, but that phrase is what people who like Biden, that is why they vote for him. That is
people I avoid on
absolutely nothing to do with Biden, because if anyone spent 10 minutes looking at his history on, Google, they could see that he spent his entire life screwing the American people.
So, do you want Sarah Palin to run as an alternative?
Christ, no.
But she's hot though.
No, she's not.
If we're gonna go purely on attractiveness, the Democrats already had the most attractive politician put up, and they said no, they didn't want her. They Tulsi Gabbard. All right, like let's be objective about this. That she was an extremely attractive woman.
Yeah, can we talk about that?
You don't think the Republicans have the winning bet with Sarah Huckabee Sanders?
No. Oh, she came out with a new book. It looks really bad.
Sarah Huckabee?
Yeah. No, but anyway, what I was saying is, so what I didn't understand, this is why Democrats have just, okay, so they say, oh yeah, we want to, they're like, oh yeah, we want a woman of color who's young. We want a young woman of color, or we like to be in power, who believes in all of these progressive things. That they have that in Tulsi Gabbard, yet they completely write her off, and they find ways to try to, I don't want to say cancel, but basically cancel her. But she checks off literally all of the diversity boxes that they want, almost all of the policy boxes, with the exception of foreign policy, because basically there's like a bit of a Stockholm syndrome with the parties, with the military-industrial complex.
Now, here's the thing. The Democrats do not want a woman of color. They want their woman of color.
Precisely. But
they want a political insider that they have a potential to, I don't know about control, but definitely influence it.
You know, I called Kamala Harris being Biden's VP from the very beginning.
Everybody did. Everybody did.
Which made it all the more sad when she made her biggest splash by criticizing him in the...
And calling him a racist!
No, she said, I'm not calling Joe Biden, I'm not calling you a racist.
But I was that person.
But that was me as a little
Yeah,
girl.
I mean, that was the only time I was even slightly tempted to be like, oh, yeah, you kind of seem like you got something going, Kamala Harris.
No, she won that debate. Like, objectively, she did win that debate. Mm-hmm. I think, like, rhetorically speaking, she did fantastic in that debate. But
whether you agree with the policies,
and I hate Kamala. I despise Kamala with almost every bone in my body. But the thing is, I mean, I just had a thought, actually, within like 10 seconds ago. What if she purposefully dropped out because there were some back in December, because there was already behind the scenes talking and scheming about her being VP at that point? And then when the Democrats, they basically went into neoliberal Voltron mode. They all dropped out at once and formed behind Biden.
Form Voltron, and then look, it's just.
And you get called a conspiracy nut job when you make that assumption, and it's just like, dude, like the fuck.
It's not conspiracy. That's just how politics
exactly work. That's exactly how politics work. Like there was I can get, like, I wouldn't even take that bet because I'm like 99% sure it actually fucking happened. That phone call came up and said, hey, Kamala, we see here that your polling numbers just aren't where they need to be to continue on in the race, right? What if we had a conversation about a potential VP pick where we're looking at a woman of color who has a certain progressive list of policy positions and votes recently that would solidify the far left progressive wing of the party to solidify them into voting for Joe Biden, right? Would that be something that you potentially have an interest in, right? And they're like, well, yeah, I'd be definitely interested to be vice president, right? And it's like, well, and then they have that conversation. Well, like, this is all hypothetical talk. We're just gauging interest and stuff like that, right? Because you don't want to have anything solidified. And then
I don't think she really has progressive chops. I mean,
well, if you actually look at her voting record, right? Like her voting record it tends to be rather more progressive recently, right? Like when she became an actual senator, her voting record was rather progressive, right?
And once again, it's just don't look into her past, because if you do, you will see that it's nonsense. But
right, no, I personally agree with that. Her voting record is just obviously a facade to protect, to hide her obviously garbage fucking past, right? And it's ridiculous. But that's how that conversation absolutely went. I wouldn't, if anybody said, well, I bet you it didn't happen. I'm like, I'm not taking that back because I'm going to lose.
Anyhow, I'm going to offer this insight. It's 2 a.m. and on the Politicrats channel, streams have a tendency to go to
I was only going to go. I was actually about to say
5 hours. So
no, we're going to go another 6 minutes. I was going to go till 2.
Okay.
Can you make it 4 minutes?
Yeah, I can make it 4 minutes.
Perhaps, I think 6 minutes would give everyone enough time to make closing statements.
Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to lead into next.
Awesome.
Just on the nature of liberalism and its effects, again, its effects on society. What do you think its impact is going to be on the future? Where do you think it is going to go as an ideology? Do you think and I'm talking about in terms of modern liberalism, the Enlightenment tradition in general, or classical liberalism or progressivism, just whatever. What do you think the future of liberalism is going to be? And I would like to start with Grayson.
Well, the future of liberalism is all theoretical because it will really depend on coronavirus and it just there's a lot of things that can change. Like, will this refugee crisis cause the big upset of right-wing populism in Europe, or will Donald Trump somehow win the election and make America the small nation that prefers populist presidential candidates? So the future liberalism seems a little bleak, but I can't say for certain.
Okay, Lapis?
Liberalism has done a wonderful job in setting the stage for a global change, a massive global change. And this might seem at first to lead to kind of a reactionary populism, and perhaps it will for a few decades. But ultimately, I believe due to common interest, socialism will win out, and people will look back on liberalism as a very useful thing because it was a building block for a better tomorrow.
Okay, Fogg?
I think liberalism is largely a destructive force. I'm not overly sad to see the statues of classical liberals toppled. I think in the long run, well, in the near term, probably over the next few decades, China is going to be the hegemonic power, and liberalism is going to lose global dominance. So I don't think that liberalism has too much longer of a lifespan.
Okay, Amir?
To me, I think liberalism overall is not going to disappear as a social force, but I believe it's humanity's final real ideology. I think we're heading towards a post ideological age with liberalism supplanted as the cultural and intellectual hegemony. I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. I think we're at the, let's say, post historical period. Basically saying I'm agreeing with Fukuyama.
Okay.
Okay. So
and Damnation. Oh, yep,
gotcha.
You're already starting to get.
Very good. So, me personally, liberalism is the path forward in regards to how humanity moves forward, because what this does, it allows for the maximizing of freedoms, in the idea that people get to operate in freedom of choice and decide how they want to live and operate their lives, right? Because of that, it actually creates better outcomes overall for human beings in individualistic societies. And by empowering people to make their own personal choices, they can then choose to overcome whatever adversarial things that they have in their lives and progress towards a better future for themselves, right? And also, on top of that, America will never be a socialist country, period.
Okay. On that note, thank you, all of you guys, and everybody else who has come and gone and come again and gone again.
I just because
Alkazai too is one of them. But for coming on tonight and providing your insights, I think that it was a very productive conversation, and I think it definitely was worth having 2 episodes covering this topic, because liberalism is a very nuanced subject. It means different things to different people, and different people have different opinions on its effects on society. And I think that it definitely has had a lot of positive impacts on society, and it's had some negative ones too. I mean, I think that it is like that with all ideologies, all philosophical ideals, and nothing is entirely black or white. But again, I think this was a very productive conversation. I actually think this is probably the best stream so far out of all of them on this channel. And I would really like to have all of you back on sometime. Just different episodes, like not necessarily all of you together at once for the same episode. Just in general, I think you guys are all fantastic guests. And I'd also urge everybody, the audience. Well, thank you to the audience, everyone who stuck around since the beginning. It looks like we've had a pretty big turnout in terms of viewers. We have 10 people watching right now, which, in the greater scheme of things, isn't that many people, but for the size of this channel right now, that is rather large, especially in terms of consistent viewership. But I'd like to thank you all again for watching and for leaving your comments in the or not comments, but for giving your insights in the chat as well. I'll do a better next job of trying to communicate with you guys, but I try to do that more towards the very end. But yeah, so I'd urge all you guys to like, subscribe. I could definitely use the subscriber count. And to click the bell, because that gives you notifications when future videos are coming out. And yeah, thanks for coming, all you guys, and thanks for watching, everybody. Good night.
Good night.